Okay, welcome to the meeting of Alto Parks and Rec, May 26th, 2015. Members of the public, if you want to speak on any item, whether it's on the agenda or not, please fill out a speaker form and hand it to Catherine. Our first is roll call.
Stacy Ashland.
Here.
Deidre Cromie. Jennifer Hedderly. Ed Lowing.
Here.
Abby Knopper. Pat Markovich.
Here.
Keith Rechtel.
Here. Okay, do we have any agenda changes, requests, or deletions? Okay, then we will move on. No oral communications, no one has filled out a speaker card, so we will move on to new business. And the first is approval of draft minutes. Does anyone have any comments or corrections for the draft minutes?
I had one over on page 69, particularly since it sets the stage for this motion for tonight. Line 1, sorry. The left side of my thing is
374?
didn't print out.
Oh.
No, 355.
Okay.
So there was a comment that I made that this is the resolution around the fire that was a CIP.
Yeah.
It's actually fire prevention plan.
Yes.
I hate to add entire words. I don't know how that was missed in the verbatim minutes, but it doesn't make sense
I think
to say it was a fire.
the audio was not the best last week.
That's correct. And then further down on page 374, the last line said, even after it gets out of the committee, we can also still do a resolution to council. As opposed is not correct. We're saying we would be doing that to council. That was the plan, which you'll see is going to be actual tonight, so I thought we should correct that.
And is that it? Any other corrections? Okay. Do we have to move for the
Yeah,
vote?
move the minutes as corrected.
Okay.
Move the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes pass. The minutes are approved. I should say. Okay, first on our new business is approval of memo to council on supporting funding for the implementation of the Foothill Park Fire Master Plan. Do we want to do the presentation and then we have public comment? Do we want to do that
We
after? Yeah. Herb wants to talk. Let's have Darren present first and then we'll have Herb talk.
Good evening, Darren Anderson.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, do we want to do it that way, or do we want to do it in terms of recapping from the CIP process?
However you'd like. I could just give a quick background on this and explain what's been a CIP.
In the context of CIPs, that'd be
Sure.
great.
Sure. Good evening, Darren Anderson, Division Manager, Open Space, Parks and Golf. The memo that was attached to your document was originally drafted on behalf of the Commission to the Finance Committee. It was at the request of the Commission at a retreat when I explained that funding that was originally submitted for the Foothills Fire Master Plan as a capital improvement project had been turned down last year, and that instead of going in as another capital project, we were informed that from now on it would be operating budget. And a quick backstory on the plan itself. It was adopted by council in 2009, and the plan was really about lessons learned from Oakland Hills Fire and how the Palo foothills is very similar threats, and that the goals are designed to mitigate and address those impacts and those fire hazards. The plan's got 51 treatment areas, and they're largely centered around Foothills Park, Pearson, Restadero Reserve, 12 miles of city roads. And when it was first created, the plan had a cost estimate of about $700,000 for the cycle of treatments. And a few years later, in fiscal year 12, council approved a capital improvement project to fund $200,000 worth of the plan. And it was slow to take off, largely because of staff lacked the capacity to manage this project. And I guess the other important thing to note is it was only $200,000, even though there was $700,000 of work. As I mentioned, we struggled. This was co-managed between Public Works, Fire Department, Emergency Services and Police and Community Services, all working cooperatively together. We didn't have much traction until we formed a partnership with the Fire Safe Council. And they have helped us manage and implement this project, and since have utilized the vast majority of the funding that was in that capital improvement project. Knowing that the funds were running out, we contracted out with the author of the plan, the original plan in 2009. She gave us fresh numbers, reevaluated what there was to do. The memo I attached kind of explains the breakdown, but roughly it delineates the little pot of funding for fire. Fire already had that money in the previous budget allotment in their operating funds. It was $60,000, mainly focused on doing prescribed burns and fuel load assessments, and then a portion of the project management consultant fee. Public Works, by and large, does the roadside clearing, and they also have a portion of the project management. And everything inside the parks was going to be community services portion, and you can see that's reflected in the $66,700 price. And that's the backstory, and I'll turn it over to Commissioner Lau.
Yeah, so the ad hoc committee has been meeting for a couple of years, 3 years now, I think, with the CIP, with staff to review CIPs, which has been a very effective process, I think, for all of us. And this project of fire prevention, as Darren discussed, was funded, as he discussed, but then it was underfunded and by a lot, and it still is. And so instead of depending on the kind of vagaries of the CIP approval process, we discussed at the retreat the idea that we should have this amount of expenditures put in the budget regularly and annually, because it's a safety hazard. And so we previewed that last month, excuse me. So tonight, with Darren's introduction, we have a motion that is itemized in your packet in the boldface, which is that to ensure that residents are protected from fire risks in Foothill Park and Grass Trail Preserve, PRC recommends that council approve necessary maintenance for the Foothills Fire Management Plan annually and routinely in the respective departmental budgets, rather than have this work be subject to prioritization and potential non-approval of longer-term CIP projects. So the way this document is constructed, just prior to that prior to that motion, is kind of a summary of the explanation of why, particularly that we want to emphasize and prioritize the safety of our residents in all of our parks. So I'd like to make that motion and have it seconded and have a discussion.
What time are we letting the public speak?
I think after we make the motion,
Okay,
I need a second though.
I will second that. Okay. And now public comment. We have one speaker, public Herb Borak. You have 3 minutes.
Chair and Commissioners, I was at the Finance Committee meeting this afternoon, and one concern I had was trying to decipher what was being done in the budget and related request for proposal for the Foothills Fire Management Program. And despite it having been explained to me in general terms, I attempted to go to the operating budget to see if I was going to be using it to find this out. And if you turn page by page, you're lucky you might find all 3 of these. But where they are in the part of the descriptions in the part of the budget document for each department program, which says budget adjustments, and it's only then you would know. Now maybe if year to year they're the same, then it wouldn't appear there. I would hope that if it continues to be in the operating budget rather than the capital budget, that there's some central way in the budget document itself of finding this, rather than having to find it in 3 different departments. I mean, there's no index for this, and other than the fact that it mentions in each of them that it's in the other departments as well, it would seem to me to make more sense to have it all in one place. The second concern is that the operating budget is something that's adopted every year by the council, that they're not committing themselves to future expenditure amounts in each succeeding budget. So this is the commission's recommendation to the council. I haven't seen action the council can take that would ensure today that's going to be in the budget in year 2, 3, 4, or 5. Finally, the last sentence of the letter says that the joint department implementation plan and projected budget from CSD staff is attached for your reference. And my question is that something that's from the memorandum, or is that some other document, and what is it? Because I don't see anything to indicate what that attachment it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, discussion.
Well, just speaking to the motion at this point, is that the objective is to take some of the vagaries out of this safety hazard by being able to clear the brush and not have it be an ongoing safety hazard. And the thought is that by our recommendation of having it be annually and routinely approved, that it is an operating thing for the safety of the parks, as opposed to be dependent on the difficulties of the prioritization of CIPs. I'm proposing I want discussion on this as well, but I'm proposing that what we do is send this overlay letter with, in reverse order of how it came in the packet, so that the memo that Darren wrote on behalf of staff, which is very thorough and detailed, as it always is when it comes from Darren, is very much appreciated. That lays out the budget as it's broken down in those 3 departments, and is in support of the idea of why it makes sense to do it as part of the normal budget. Excuse me.
I have some questions. How's the city budget allocated? For the CIP project process, we do it 1 year at a time, but we have a 5-year allocation going forward. So even though we're not committing to that, we are saying this is the coming attractions. We expect to be paying this in the next 5 years. Is there anything like that for the city budget? Can you put a placeholder in future years so that when they're doing the budget, they know these fixed numbers are already in the budget?
There's not a 5-year plan for the operating budget, but as we submit new requests, new needs, like this one, we submit it as an ongoing, in this case, an ongoing funding need. And that's how it's being presented to the Finance Committee and then ultimately to Council. We can also submit things as a one-time need, and that, then it's not in the base budget, essentially. You have to ask for it again for the next
year.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you designate it as ongoing, then it is kind of like the CIP.
Becomes part of the base budget, and then it's still each year we have to approve the operating budget, and this is true, and things can get removed, and but there needs to be good reason for that, and generally things that are ongoing and they have a need, like this one, where there's a plan that actually says that we need to do this to keep residents and property safe, unlikely that it would be removed, I think.
And how does the work if you have money left over? For the CIPs, if you have money left over, you have a little window of time to spend it past the end of the calendar year, don't you?
Yeah, generally that's not the case. In the operating budget, if you don't spend the money and it's not encumbered for something, then it returns back to the reserve, and
But CIPs, if it's not used, you can extend it into the next year.
You can reappropriate it, right?
And so by putting it in the operating budget, we are losing some flexibility then.
Correct. I mean, it becomes part of the base budget. I think you have to help me out here, Darren. But whatever, if it's $150,000 a year, that's the estimate for keeping up with the fire management plan. Then we would do as much as we can to spend down those funds and make sure we're doing the work. If we don't spend it all, you're right, it would return to the reserve, and then the next fiscal year begins July 1. You get another $150,000 to continue to work.
Okay.
The only thing I'd add to that is ASD had contacted us and said this is not the kind of thing, not the kind of program we're going to do through capital budget any longer. So it's not even applicable for the capital budget in their eyes. And so hence they were the one originally directing this. You really need to put this into an operating.
And I was just going to add, if say Darren, for his piece of it related to the Foothills Park, enters into a contract with some firm to do work in Foothills Park, but the work is not complete by the end of the fiscal year, he can choose to extend that contract contract and move the money into the new fiscal year to continue to spend on it.
Oh, so if you contract out and the work is not done, it's the same thing, you lose that money.
No, you can actually choose to reappropriate like a CIP project. You could say that this work still is going to continue. We didn't get it done by the end of the fiscal year. We intend to get it done within, whatever, such and such time in the new fiscal year. We want to take this 2015 funds into 2016.
Okay, and that doesn't decrease the amount you get for the next year?
No, I don't think so, but that does have to be encumbered.
It does have to be
Contract,
encumbered,
yeah.
correct, if it's within a contract.
Keith, could I just add one other thing to your point, to hear Darren speak to this? It seems like it would be more accurate because you're making these budgeting decisions a year in advance or 6 months in advance of when you're going to use them. Whereas with a CIP, you're kind of taking a 5-year horizon. Well, I think it's about $100,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So he's making these decisions in a very short term and knows that it's a safety problem and knows that he wants to be able to use it. And the fact that it's being contracted out also minimizes the constraint on staff time. So it seems like it's a pretty low probability, but I raise that for you to speak to, not me, that it wouldn't be used.
No, that's we agree, and I think we can spend it out appropriately, especially with that relationship we have now with the Fire Safe Council, where they're really helping to project manage this. It also puts a little onus on us to be tight with our schedules, to be planning a little more diligently and strictly, I think, which is a good thing.
In the past, the flexibility to spend in other future years actually has maybe slowed us down a little. We didn't have the gun to our head, and some of the work wasn't done when we expected it to be done originally.
I think that can be true, yes, yeah. There is some added flexibility. There are times with certain capital improvement projects where, of a 5-year project and it's ongoing, the 3rd year might be a heavy year where we're going to do, in the case of like a tennis court, maybe we load up a couple big sites that lend themselves to doing them together, like Mitchell Park, where we have 7 tennis courts. Well, the annual funding for tennis courts isn't enough to do 7, so you have to save a little and it rolls over and allows you to plan like that. It's not necessarily something you can do in this scenario with the operating budget, but that was an added flexible component of the capital budget that was helpful.
And in this memo, we said 181,000. How much of that is due to making up work that wasn't done in the past, and how much of that is ongoing?
That's a good question. In my memo, you'll see that it's anticipated in FY17 we're going to require less funding for CSD, approximately 48,000, whereas this year we're 66. So it is variable, and that's due to the cyclical nature of vegetation control. We've made some good strides this last year or two since we formed that relationship with Fire Safe Council and spent out that money. So you might see a little dip, and then you might see a little increase where it goes even higher than what we originally asked. So it's continual evaluation. Like I said, we did hire that consultant. She is going to redo the fire management plan, so we'll have revised numbers, and we'll just kind of monitor closely and request what we need.
And so the yearly budget in steady state, when we get everything taken care of, will be in the neighborhood of 180.
About
maybe a little lower, but in that,
I think
not dramatically lower.
Right. I think you're going to see peaks and valleys,
Okay.
and not too deep or too high.
Now, the work that we're doing for this is that we're clearing brush. Are we doing anything with fire breaks? So if a
Yes.
fire does start, it's only burns a segment of the park.
Yes. This also funds the 60,000 for CSD's portion. I'm sorry, 66,700 for CSD's portion. Also includes fire break clearance inside the park. Includes clearing around facilities inside the park, the interpretive center, the restrooms, the picnic areas, all those kind of areas, and the roadways as well inside.
Okay. And is there anything else that we could do if we were worried about fire up at Foothills Park? Could we add additional hydrants up in the park, or is there any other type of action we could take other than clearing brush?
No, I think the plan was well thought out. It was a comprehensive one. We looked at the whole area. There are components of our relationship with Fire Safe Council, and especially this consultant who drafted it. We've got a good relationship, and we're looking at things like educating surrounding residents that they're doing the right thing, contacting our associates like Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space. So we own a good portion of The right side of the road, as you're going up Page Mill, we own the Palo Alto side, and there are components of the left side of Page Mill Road that are owned by Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District or managed by them. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to clear one half of the road. You gotta clear both. And so having communications with them, making sure they understand what we're gonna work towards and what they could do cooperatively to achieve the same goal, those are the steps we're taking. I think we're on the right path.
But if a fire starts there and we want to put it out with water, is it tanker trucks, or do we have some hydrants up in the park?
We have 4 reservoirs, one inside the park up by Station 8, and 3 others in and around the adjacent area, one in Pearson Rascadero Preserve, the Dahl Reservoir. So they would utilize those. In the past, they've also utilized Lake Boranda. So they'll come down and they use, we've done training exercises where they'll bring down a helicopter, fill up their bucket from the lake, and come and do targeted drops when they need to. And then there are hydrants in and around the area as well.
Where are the hydrants?
There's one in Foothills, and forgive me, I know there's another one in and around Page Mill Road that they could utilize.
So it's down near the interpretive center, or where would it be?
Forgive me, I don't have
Okay.
that information handy at this moment. I can get back to you.
Okay, I'm just curious, and clearing brush I think is a very good thing to do, but sometimes we get so focused on this is what we do for fire plan and not look at big pictures. There are other things we can do that can mitigate the fire plan, mitigate the fire risk. Okay. That's all my questions. Do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Deirdre Broming.
Can you remind me, who is the Fire Safe Council?
Yeah, there are a few fire safe councils, and they're nonprofits formed by citizens who are concerned about the issues of fire safety, and they've just hired a staff person, so they're becoming a little more robust. But really, it's 2 to 3 people who help manage this, and they have relationships with all the surrounding agencies, Cal Fire, Menlo Fire, of course, Palo Alto Fire. And they essentially work as a project manager for us, where we have enter into a contract with them, we provide them with the funding, and they contract out with CAL FIRE, for example. The CAL FIRE hand crews will come in and take care of some of the brush work. They can also enter into contracts with private tree companies, for example, to take care of work for us.
Okay, I mean, I read the fire plan. How many years ago did that come past? You said 2009?
2009.
So that was 6 years ago. So I have to say I don't really understand this well enough to vote on it. I'm going to have to abstain unless I somehow gain more clarity. At the time when the fire plan came through, we had time to digest it. We did a site visit. And, I felt like at that point I got a really good sense of what it was all about and what we were spending the money on. But I'm just really confused by this. It seems to me like it's a multi-jurisdictional issue because we're bordering also Los Altos Hills, and I don't know what they're doing. Do they put any money in the pot to help? I don't even know if that's a reasonable request, but what does Los Altos Hills contribute anything to this?
Not to our work, because our work is focusing on our land. So we're not doing any work on anybody else's.
Well, what if a fire breaks out across the street from our land? Do they have
Yes.
their own fire plan to come put things
I
out?
don't know that they have.
Or
their
is it just
fire-
going to cross the street over to our property? I mean, it seems like we have to work together with the bordering communities, and I don't understand how this budget works exactly. I feel like I can't really I can't really agree to voting yes on something where I don't understand how the money flows and how it works year after year. So I personally will just have to not vote on it yet. It seems like if we're going to do a new fire plan, that's when it should come back to us, so we know what we're voting on.
Okay.
I don't know.
Commissioner Lowen.
I was gonna say that were you here for the whole first part and the memo and all this when we went over that? I don't remember when you came in. So.
I came in 5 minutes late.
Okay, so there's no difference in the fire plan, and the issue that's on the table is not to rediscuss the fire plan. That's not the policy issue. The policy issue that we're just making, this motion is making a recommendation on, is that we just move the same amount of funds from a CIP process to the normal operating budget, so that we make sure that we can do these things that these folks are going to do anyway, wherever that money is, on the same fire plan, to make the parks safe. So there's no readdressing of the fire plan in this at all. could there be or should there be is a whole different discussion, which could be perfectly fine. It's just a question of where to put the monies to make sure that the work gets done.
Do you know why our fire plan didn't get approved and funded adequately when it went before council?
It was approved, yeah, it was approved by the council in 2009. It was funded, it was just underfunded. And my hunch is it was at a time when there wasn't a lot of excess money. And so it was probably $200,000 to get the process started, and we'll see how it goes, is my understanding. And that's why it was funded at $200,000. So it was approved, it was well vetted. At the time, a great deal of public outreach went into it. So I think the plan is still good. Again, this calls for no scope change. It's just allocating funding. The request has already been submitted. It's gone through the finance committee, who had no issues with the funding as proposed. And again, parts of it are already in there. The fire, for example, has $60,000. That had been part of their operating budget for some years. It was dedicated towards the fire plan and specifically for their component, which is that prescribed burn and fuel load assessment. Public Works has always done the roadside clearing. Before the fire plan, that was always in their department's responsibilities, although it wasn't as robust as it's called out in the fire plan. So they are heading up that portion. And CSD, as stewards of the land, have the inside the park component. And so I think you heard it suggested, well, maybe it would be best as one pot of money. As we discussed it between all the various departments who were involved, no one wanted to bear the full responsibility of having all the funding in one site. There's always, the vagaries of budget years. When you're in a down year, someone's prone to take it. There's also, it becomes the onus is all on the department with all the money to manage the entire thing. The relationship the criteria we've got right now is each of those departments will stagger or vary leadership. So right now CSD is leader of this committee that is working on the fire plan. And then come July 1st, they'll switch to Public Works and they'll do a year. So that's why the funding is kind of separated out the way it is. But the scope is the same.
It just seems really confusing to me. It seems like for something as important as fighting fire, we should have a really clear funding pathway. I've never seen anything come before us this complicated.
Well,
So
I think let's keep it simple and keep it focused here.
Yeah.
Commissioner Lowen, can you reread the motion that we have? And so we know this is what we're voting on, the motion.
Correct.
There's a lot of other things associated with it, but this motion is very simple. And so can you please read it again?
Sure, thank you. To ensure that residents are protected from fire risks in Foothill Park and Arasterdale Preserve, PRC recommends that council approve necessary maintenance for Foothill's fire management plan annually and routinely in the respective departmental budgets, rather than have this work be subject to prioritization and potential non-approval of longer-term CIP projects.
So Commissioner Cromie, knowing that that's the motion, does that change your objections?
No.
And so what are your objections with that motion?
I can't say, well, I'm just wondering, is there precedent for this kind of management with CIPs, multi-departmental CIPs getting approved on a regular, you're saying it's being in the, we're trying to put some money in an operating budget, but how are our other operating budgets handled? Are they handled by the city manager? Making sure that the proper department has jurisdiction over them? I'm just confused about the management side of this.
Sure, and
I feel like it's patched together. And that's okay, but I don't understand it exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe other commissioners do. You don't need my vote to carry it
Sure,
potentially.
but just for the sake of clarity, to me, I guess in my mind, it's not so confusing and it's not ill-placed. That you would have prescribed burn funding for the fire department makes sense to me. No one else is going to do that but the fire department. That you would have the inside the park work funded by community services. We manage that park. We have the funding to do all the other operating components within the park. So that seems to make sense to me too. And that Public Works, who has routinely done roadside clearing as far as last 25, 30 years, it also seems appropriate that roadside clearing would remain a portion of their budget. So that was the rationale behind the division.
And our motion is not specifying this breakup. What we're saying is we think the city council should make a commitment to funding fire prevention every year, annually.
As opposed to it being possibly not funded if some other CIP comes in that in the short term would have a higher priority or had the better press, as it were. This is just making sure we have it every year, and we're not at risk of losing the funding because it's in the CIP process. This keeps it year to year to year. We don't have to keep fighting for it. So it's just a matter of which bucket you're taking it out of.
And a further issue was what Darren mentioned earlier, is that we can't even fund this by CIP anymore. They've changed the rules for CIPs, and this does not qualify as a CIP. So the funding has to come from a different source other than CIP.
And if we don't do anything, what's going to happen?
The money would be exhausted. There would be no funds other than the existing 60,000 that resides in the fire department's budget, and they could use that to partially fund the Fire Safe Council, and they would get a small amount of work done. But by and large, your picnic areas, your evacuation routes, and your defensible spaces would overgrow eventually, and you'd have a higher and more dangerous fire risk.
Can I just add to that?
Sure.
And the money's not necessarily in danger of going, because who puts the budget together, you asked? It's the city manager. It's the city manager's operating budget, and he prepares that with the department heads, and the Public Works Department, Community Services, and Fire Department put it in the proposed budget for 16 as an ongoing cost to keep up with the fire management plan. The council approved the fire management plan, so it is in the proposed budget. It's going through the process now. I think the memo is more sort of to support that recommendation that it be in the operating budget and be ongoing. To the other question you had, Commissioner Cromie, I was trying to think of an example where there's, we share responsibility, and I don't know if this one helps or not, but for our parks we have CSD manages the parks in a lot of ways, but Public Works manages the trees within the parks, and they'll go in and do the tree maintenance while Community Services is managing the more on-the-ground maintenance work, and so we share that responsibility. We also meet regularly with them, park by park, to talk about maintenance of the park. So we do a lot of that kind of shared work with other departments.
With a standing budget.
Mm-hmm. Right. So they have a tree budget, for instance, in that example, and they have contractors that with the trees, and we have our contractors that do the mowing and other work, landscape work, and we share in that to maintain the park.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay. Commissioner Ashland.
I have 4 of them, and I'm not sure who can provide the answers, but in the order that I have them, the first one is, why was this a CIP in the first place, considering it's not capital improvement? It's always been ongoing maintenance, so that's the first question, is why did it start that way that we have to change it? Second of all, if it's only a question of allocating appropriate budget, why is it coming to our commission at all? What feedback do you want from us? If the finance committee approves it, then I'm not clear what feedback you are looking for from us. The third one was, how does this ongoing work that CSD is doing inside the parklands differ or overlap with the other ongoing maintenance that's already happening in the park? That's not clear to me as well. We don't have that budget or those tasks delineated, so I'm unclear if there's overlap or if they're the same or how that relates. And lastly, if this is an ongoing expense, why are we allocating it to a consultant rather than hiring the staff to handle this work?
Consultants are cheaper.
Let me start with your first question. Why is CIP? At the time, lots of CIPs were strung together to support programs on an ongoing basis. Usually there were more capital related, obviously, like tennis courts. But there are other ones like weed management of, there's one called Open Space Lakes and Ponds. And it's predominantly used to clear the milfoil weeds that grows in Boronda Lake. Well, that's a vegetated clearing too, and it was a CIP and remains one. It's kind of grandfathered in, it was set to be ongoing. So it was a different paradigm, I guess, where that kind of thing was encouraged and thought to be the way we're going to do things. And then ASD has changed, and now they're no longer doing that kind of program through the capital budget. Instead, they want it in operating. Your second question, why not hire staff? I think it's just exponentially more expensive. And this is the kind of the wave of the future as you work with a nonprofit partner who has the time and resources to make this happen. For example, we had the funding in 2012. We had 4 departments involved, but nothing was happening. And it really took off once we formed this partnership. So it's a good thing. I think it's effective, and it's certainly cost effective relative to hiring a person to run this independently. We still have oversight, CSD, myself, I'm heavily involved. So it's not as though it's strictly run by, I helped develop the work plan with the Fire Safe Council. We manage their contract. We're involved in oversight. Our rangers are on scene at every single bit of work that happens. So staff is still involved. It just helps take some of the onus off. Can you repeat your 2 other questions?
Yeah, one of them was if this is just a question of which bucket of money does it come from, why is it coming to our commission, what feedback are you looking for from us? And the other one was how this overlaps with other ongoing park maintenance that we're already doing.
The feedback, and the reason I'm coming to you, is at our commission retreat, we brought up that we would be requesting this funds, and it was brought to me to say, would you please draft a memo for us to consider to sending something to the finance committee just to say we support this. So that's the feedback, is essentially I was sharing the memo that I was asked to create, and the commission, if it felt so inclined, could express that to the finance committee, or as we found out, it's more appropriate to send it to council. And you could vocalize your support or lack thereof to the council. How it differs from routine maintenance is the routine maintenance is not strictly focused on fire. There may be some components that address that, but by and large, it has to do with fixing fences, mowing grass, kind of routine maintenance, trail clearing. Fire safety that's prescribed in the plan is far more robust and involves clearing. It's already happened, of course, because this has been going on since fiscal year 13, but clearing areas that hadn't been cleaned for some time. And one example would be on Page Mill Road, the norm had been Public Works would clear something like 3 to maybe 4 feet in off the road. The fire plan calls for 30 feet. Now it's not clear everything 30 feet in, but it's got a very clear and detailed prescription of what you're going to limb up. Ladder fuels, which are fuels that will lead up into trees, which canopy over the road and cause all sorts of potential for spreading fire faster. So it's very different. It's far more robust.
Thanks.
I call the question.
I was just going to make one comment.
Commissioner Lowen.
Thank you. Since Darren is absolutely correct, he did this on our behalf, and we've been talking about this from the CIP program for the last 2+ years, openly in the commission. This isn't a budgeting issue. Our role is to advise council on important policy or substantive issues with respect to parks. The view in putting this memo together, which we also did discuss at the retreat, was to say we have a safety problem here in our parks that hasn't been treated adequately for the last X years, since 2009 it turns out. And this is a way that we feel you can address it in a very simple way by just changing around how it's funded annually and routinely being the critical words there. So that's the role that we're taking here. We're not taking a budgeting role or anything like that.
Yeah. We're not voting on the implementation. We're voting on whether the city council will have a commitment of funding this every year, or we encourage them to have a commitment.
Call the question.
Okay. Let's, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'm
Abstain.
abstaining because I
Abstain.
don't feel qualified to give a vote on it.
Okay.
I don't understand it well enough.
Okay.
Thanks, Darren, for all your help behind the scenes and on the scene. Thank you.
I just ask a question about how to get this to the council, though, in a timely manner so that they see it. I think it's June 8th, looking at Councilmember Fells. That's the first time the council will review the operating budget for this year. The hope is that they see the memo or hear from the commission on this year. It might be best if actually a commission comes and just says a few words about it and hands it in at that time.
Well, the format was put together so they could get this anytime now if it's approved, which it has just been. With this note, setting the background, borrowing liberally from Darren's work in the front for a summary, and then the detail in the back in case they want to get into
Yeah.
the budget. I don't know when that means in terms of the packet goes out, when they would physically receive it.
The packet is like 6 weeks out in advance with so many reviews, so that's why I'm concerned that it'd be difficult to get it in.
So is this an in-place memo, Councilmember Filsa?
So, I guess, as I look at this, it's $181,000 in 2016, right?
Mhm.
Is that already in the capital budget? So just
It's
a
in
question
the
on moving it from the
operating.
capital budget?
It's already in the operating budget.
It's already in the operating.
Yeah.
I
It's just
would
in
say-
support of what's already there, basically.
Yeah, I would say double check with Walter and Wallen, see what the best way to include it
Okay.
in the budget process is.
Yeah, so we'll see if we can still figure out how to include it as an attachment if we can. Yeah. But so far,
I'm sure they're gonna have an addenda sheet
yeah, right.
of some kind, right? 'Cause it's like-
Okay. I'll let you know.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next topic, which is Bixby Park. We have one speaker, Emily Renzel.
I think that staff, is this on? It doesn't sound like it is just for the recording.
Yes.
Okay. I think staff has done a good job in developing the interim plan. It's pretty barren out there right now, as you probably know, and so every little blade of weed or whatever's gonna grow out there is important for now. At the very cover sheet of this master plan, you will see that cute little burrowing owl. And there's intention in this plan to provide some little areas where the burrowing owl can survive. They use squirrel holes for their homes, and due to state regulations, we are under some sort of mandate to kill all the squirrels out at the park. And when I go hiking on Monday mornings, the gasser is out there gassing all the squirrels, which are practically the only wildlife out there on the land itself. I've read up online about squirrels. They don't generally burrow more than 3 or 4 feet in for their burrows. They go horizontal. It makes sense. If you were a squirrel, you're not going to dig a hole that water will run into. And part of the issue is from the state is whether water will run into this. And I'm just hoping that you guys might call this out as a to give a little bit more power to our staff when they go to the state to try to alter that regulation. If you look in the plan, the 10-acre measure east side is sort of not, it has nothing planned in it, and that's appropriate because nothing can be done in it unless it's rededicated. However, as you look at the rest of the plan and thinking toward the future, make sure that what gets put in place at least allows for connections through there if and when it should become park again. So I think that's an important consideration. I noted this week when we were out there, and maybe it's been there a while and I hadn't noticed it, but every 50 feet along the road as you're looking out toward the bay are signs that say no parking anytime. And there are these little signs marching along there in an open space where you're trying to have a natural experience. So I know that at some point there was an attempt to have a signage plan for open spaces and for parks, and I don't know what ever became of it, but I think it would be important to try to find out what became of it, if it was adopted, to find out how it's being implemented and what the trigger points are for people to pay attention to them, because I think no parking anytime is fine in an urban area where you know the patrol cars are going to come and maybe tow somebody and you want to have the authorization.
You're over 3 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. But anyway, I think that should be reviewed because nobody's gonna go out there and ticket and tow people, very likely, especially on weekends, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and Darren, go ahead.
Excellent. Good evening, Darren Anderson, Open Space Parks and Golf. Tonight I'm here with my colleague Matt Crump from Public Works and Taylor Peterson. She's with TRA, Environmental Sciences, who created the plan. Thank you for being here. And we are here tonight as an action item seeking your recommendation to council to adopt the park improvement ordinance for the improvements identified at the Bixby Park Hills Interim Park Concepts document. I'm going to give you a quick background of the project and the site. The park was developed and opened in phases. Phase 1, and you can kind of see it, I'm sorry that screen is a little small, but it's a 29-acre area located in the northeastern part of the former landfill. And it's currently developed as a passive park with trails, it has restrooms and some art features. Phase 2A and 2B are 46 acres, and Matt might be able to use the cursor there to identify what I'm talking about next. This is the 46 area south of Phase 1 that was capped and opened to the public in July 2011. 27 acres of Phase 2C were opened to the public on April 2015, celebration of Earth Day. And staff is currently completing the cap construction for the final 24 acres of Phase 2C to comply with their regulatory requirements and safely open up all of Bixby Park Hills to the public by the end of 2015. And the initial landscape design for Bixby Park was completed by Hargraves and Associates in 1991, which is kind of the skeleton or model we used with our very first draft. And let me bring a little background, but more recent. This is in June 2013. Council approved the final landfill closure plans, which included a preliminary configuration for this dual-use trail system, which serves both landfill maintenance vehicles and park visitors. Had the habitat island concepts, other park amenities, and the evapotranspirated or ET cap. And the ET cap is kind of a new soil cap that replaces the older style clay one with just more soil. And with that, we'll go to the current interim park concepts and pull up the design. The city entered into a contract with TRA to prepare this interim park plan for Bixby Park Hills in March 2014. And the purpose of the plan was really aimed at improving and managing the habitat, first and foremost, managing for the burrowing owls, creating a trail system that allows for safe public access that doesn't impact wildlife, ensure that the closed landfill can meet all of its regulatory requirements ongoing, identify opportunities for interpretive signage, propose adaptive management techniques for maintenance, which is especially important given that this is an interim plan. This is not long-term or indefinite. This is to kind of learn make this a park now, and some examples of what that adaptive management would look like. One example would be the kind of plants that succeed up there. In different areas, you sometimes have luck with certain species, and in others you don't. And so we intend to adapt and learn from the mistakes and find an appropriate palette that benefits the wildlife and does well up there. Same thing with the irrigation. We've got a plan right now, but we'll learn from it to see how successful it is. How long does it have to run? How long do we need it there? Because the long-term plan is to let the plants live without irrigation, any supplemental irrigation. I'll give you a little background on the public outreach, the commission and ad hoc committee feedback and involvement. July 2014, staff met with some Bayland stakeholders representing general park users, bicyclists, hikers, and environmentalists to discuss the project. And some of the feedback was suggestions included reducing the number of trails to reduce the potential impacts to wildlife, to add signage connecting the regional trail system to the proposed trails on Bixby, and include benches at scenic lookouts. And all these suggestions were incorporated in the design. Some of the stakeholders advocate for a larger parking lot. No changes are part of this existing plan. So you'll see the existing parking lot still in this design. And that's largely because a bigger parking lot would require more substantial and lengthy environmental and planning reviews, as well as exceed our allocated budget for this particular project. There is a little overflow lot adjacent to the parking lot that can accommodate 6 to 7 cars. And less than a quarter mile away, we've got some parking at the duck pond, and not too much further from that, the golf course. Permanent parking, final maintenance plans, and other structures like covered lookout areas could be considered in a future planning effort for Bixby Park Hills, or hopefully incorporated into the Baylands Comprehensive Conservation Plan, which staff proposes as CIP in 2017. In September 2014, staff presented a draft Bixby Park Hills concepts to the commission, and the commission formed an ad hoc committee to discuss the project in more detail. And staff met and started the meeting in October 2014 with this ad hoc committee and met several times. Staff also brought the project to the Architectural Review Board and received approval from them on these concepts in November 20th, 2014. Staff modified and clarified many aspects of the plan based on the comments from the meetings with the stakeholders, the commission, and especially the ad hoc committee. Big thanks to the ad hoc commissioners. Thank you again for all your work. I do have to note and apologize. In the previous time we came to the commission, the plans were not balanced so you could see them on a fold out like they are now. And Commissioner Cromie had gone to extraordinary lengths to fashion a map and go out there and hike it. And I just admire that dedication and appreciate it very much. And hopefully this one's much better and a little easier to read. That's adaptive management. The key modifications we made based on all that feedback, we're adjusting the mowing and weed management regime. For example, in response to the request and suggestion for less mowing and a greater variety of vegetation height, you'll notice that the side slopes of Bixby will not be mowed. There are other elements of the maintenance plan that also call for varying heights of vegetation to remain. We redefined vegetative planting and management with vegetative islands, low mowed grassland, mid mowed grassland, untended grassland, as I just mentioned. Delineated the management for burrowing owls and squirrel areas. And Matt will highlight the 3 areas that I'm referencing. These are the areas where we would encourage and want burrowing owls, ground squirrels, and any other burrowing animal to use and not be abated as they are on the rest of the Bixby Park Hills to protect that cap that I mentioned. So they would bring in 5 feet or more of soil, and as you heard, most of the time ground squirrels don't go any deeper than 4 feet and usually branch off laterally, so there would be no threat to the cap. However, staff totally supports this. We think it'd be a benefit for the park, but we do have to receive regulatory approval, and Cal Recycle as of now has not conceded the staff's consent or request for that. Other feedback and modifications to the plan included reducing the number of trails to create larger uninterrupted habitat areas. We reduced 1,400 linear feet of trail based on the feedback we received. To minimize habitat impact from maintenance vehicles, the landfill purchased a lightweight golf-sized cart to conduct a lot of their inspections as much as possible. We corrected the map. Commissioner pointed out that the rock swales were kind of overrepresented in the original map. We put that to the proper scale in this one so it looks more like it really does in reality. Improved recommendations for park signage to keep people on trails and away from that habitat area should we get approval to put it in. We'll put in trail etiquette signs and signage, the appropriate signage around that burrowing owl habitat area should we receive approval. Reduce the size of the group gathering node. The ad hoc committee had gone out and looked at it and said, you know what, we don't believe, and Matt, maybe you can highlight the group gathering area with the cursor if you can see it. It called for a 50-foot diameter meeting area. And once you're up there, the commissioners felt this seems like it's going to be too big. Does it really need to be that big? We did a little more internal analysis on the kind of groups that would be there. Volunteers, especially considering how far that hike is, probably does not need to be that big. 35 feet is a more appropriate diameter and width for a meeting area. It should accommodate volunteer groups, any interpretive programs that go out there. We're confident that that would meet their needs. There was another request and concern about trails being too wide. The average width of the trails is 10 feet. That accommodates that dual use, the aforementioned dual use. And they said, well, is there any way we could narrow certain ones? And Public Works said, you know, the problem is going to be, we have these heavy vehicles that are going to pass through there at various parts of the year, including wet times, and you're going to end up with deep ruts and other issues like that. And we proposed the concept of allowing the vegetation. It's prone to do this, it does this on every trail I've got, is it will gradually kind of creep in, and we can mow it in such a way, or essentially to kind of, and it's doing it now, to come in on that trail about 1 foot to 2 feet periodically, and we can allow it to stay there. And so in essence, you'll have the durable surface at 10 feet, the truck can drive over that little portion without leaving deep ruts or getting stuck, and yet you still achieve a narrowed look via the vegetation kind of creeping over the edge. At this point, we're going to walk you through some of the key components of this plan. I think first and foremost is that trail configuration, how this differs from what we once had. We, again, started with what Hargraves originally proposed, and slowly cut away based on the feedback we had from the stakeholders, from the commission and our ad hoc committee to see what you have now. And this still allows our maintenance crews to get where they need to for leachate and gas well monitoring and repairs, which is really key to their operation and in fact required of them. Most of the trails were designed to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. There are a few small sections of trail where the slope couldn't be adjusted due to drainage requirements. They're fairly limited, and I believe they're marked on the plan in such a way that you could tell if you were planning a trip and you weren't able to travail anything that's above the 5% slope, which does meet ADA. The plan also identifies those locations for park benches, interpretive signs, and wayfinding signs. At this point, I'll give you a little detail on the vegetated habitat islands. We're going to start with construction of 3 sets of the vegetated islands. You can see what they look like on the display there. But if we back out to the main screen, you can see we have several delineated, and some of them are little pockets. And we're going to do, each of those pockets we're calling kind of a set of islands. We're going to do 3 of those sets to start with. We believe we have funding to accommodate that to start with via that CIP. And we will proceed as possible if funding allows, and as we kind of see how successful they are. We may find out with that 3 sets, we've got to redesign. Maybe it's not successful. We've got to relook at our technique and come up with something a little different. But what we've got on paper right now, we think will be successful, and we're looking forward to getting it installed as quickly as possible.
Do you know which 3 you're going to start with?
Yes, we are looking at 2 of them being near the gathering areas. Maybe Matt can identify them. We still may play with this a little bit, but those are the 2 we were first looking at, and then 1 further away from any meeting area or seating area over where that's identifying those 2 other sites. They all are somewhat close to trails because we're going to have to get out there with equipment to service them and care for them and weed them, etc. Let's see, I mentioned already the adaptive management plan and how we're going to kind of adjust as we go. The plan also mentioned the 3 habitat areas, and I think Matt already showed you on the map about that. It's a good question of how we're going to get, I mentioned in the staff report that we'll continue to seek permission from CalRecycle to allow us to put this there. And as we spoke about internally, it's staff's belief that it is incredibly beneficial to have stakeholders, residents come to this organization or agency, CalRecycle, and anyone else who may oppose it, to voice their concern and say how important this is that we get this there, how important it is to the diversity of the wildlife that call this their home. And staff is definitely willing to work with those organizations and partnerships with any sort of environmentalist group to help kind of make that connection happen. We'll also continue on our own to put in this request to CalRecycle. It's just been our experience that sometimes a resident complaining seems to carry sometimes more weight than a government agency. The timeline, we're shooting, again, the 27 acres of Phase 2C were open to the public in April of 2015. We've got those last 24 acres of 2C to open January of 2016. And we're hoping we can complete construction of all the elements that you see in the plan by the summer of 2016, hopefully in advance of that. That concludes our presentation. We're available for questions. And again, we have the author of the plan, T. Peterson, here to help us with specifics, or especially the environmental portions. Okay.
Go ahead. Commissioner Fleming.
I don't have to turn this on, it just is on?
It should be,
okay.
Should be hot.
Thank you. I guess I'll go first with this. I really appreciate working with you, Darren and Ron, on this, and our consultant as well. I think we had a productive time with our ad hoc committee, getting to give feedback and getting to advocate in different directions that we thought would help with the wildlife, specifically the wildlife experience in this open space, because that's very tricky here. And a good part of this plan is dedicated toward trying to establish some burrowing owls in this area. And one reason our ad hoc and stakeholders advocated to reduce some of the trails was to allow more space for the wildlife and not completely crisscross it. So originally the trails were kind of laid down along the maintenance roads, do have to get access to all these leachate sites. And we just didn't want to recapitulate that in the trail system to allow bigger areas of land for animals to settle and not get flushed out as bikes, people, and dogs, and trucks to a certain degree go past. So I think we've made a lot of progress in this plan. I really appreciate that. And I think the vegetative islands are the way to go. Darren has thought that through. I just hope that I hope they work, and that if they don't work, there's another way that we can keep chipping away at what to do there to get native grasses established, because that's what we know the wildlife needs. But I have a couple small points here, and I'll try to bring them up now. I just want to talk first about the bigger picture here. I might have to just circle back to some of my smaller points. But in terms of the big picture, my main concern with this document is it doesn't have the teeth to really help the owls. It talks about what to do if they come, and it does. So I think the mowing descriptions are really good. I think our consultant really understands what you need to do to try to make a place conducive for the owls to come, and then what to do once they're there. But we are missing the key component of the squirrels, of the ground squirrels. And I wanted to ask again, I know I've probably asked you this already, but I guess I'll say, is it true that it's shoreline where they have burrowing owls, they don't gas the squirrels on their landfill?
That's my understanding, yes.
That's my understanding too. So that is an area that's been successful in terms of keeping burrowing owls, bringing them in, and they do have the squirrels. And so I really struggle with this document. I struggle that we don't have we probably need the description in there to talk about the burrowing habits of squirrels. Maybe a section in here to sort of say there's reason that we don't need to be concerned about. We're trying to advocate before this permitting group called Cal Recycle, but I don't see any teeth in this document to do that. I know Darren has mentioned that they are responsive potentially to concerned residents, but we don't have anyone to lead that charge. As far as I know, I haven't heard that we have a stakeholder that's really necessarily willing to take that on. It's somewhat tricky to take that on, because we're also going to be drawing attention to Shoreline Park, which basically Shoreline Park, which has burrowing owls, isn't compliant with what the permitting department wants. And I don't understand the history of that. Maybe Ron Arp can help us. I mean, maybe they just sort of went under the radar when they were setting up their program there. I don't really know why they're allowing squirrels there. So I feel like that's a fatal flaw in our plan here to get burrowing owls. I think we have everything there except for the squirrels. So I guess I want to brainstorm maybe with our staff and consultants what we can do. I'm concerned that we don't, in the document, make a stronger case for the squirrels, and I'm also concerned that we don't have a plan to advocate to our permitting facility. I'd like to have a plan in place, so before we approve this, that we really know what's going to happen. Because right now, just saying, oh, it works best if residents say something, I don't see that really gaining traction. I don't know who would, again, lead the charge on that. And then, so I want to brainstorm about that. I want your response as to how this is really going to work, so it just doesn't look like window dressing, that we would try to get some owls in there. I mean, everything looks good except we don't have the squirrels. And we have a big onus on the supervising ranger. Is that what the person is called? There's a reference to this all throughout the document, that the maintenance plan is managed by the supervising, what is the phrase in here that's used?
Supervising park ranger?
The supervising park ranger, so as a secondary branch of my discussion here is I'm wondering who that person is, if we know who the supervising ranger is, because they have such responsibility in terms of the maintenance of the fauna and flora within this document. And I'm just wondering also if that person needs, whether that person has the expertise in all of those realms to do that job. So can you guys go for those things?
There's a lot of comments and questions there. I'll see if I can try to recall the first ones. And maybe I'll just start with, it doesn't have enough teeth for squirrels. And it is a balance because we're obligated by those rules, and to compare us to someone who's not following rules is a little unfair because we put ourselves at risk for heavy fines, and other communities may be violating that. As we kind of pointed out.
Do we not know?
We do know they
are.
You
do know they are. Okay, I just didn't know.
Yeah, they are violating that. It's not something we can do. We are going to follow the rules. And we came up with, I think, a pretty good plan to work around that. And that's some pretty extensive areas highlighted on the back of this thing that shows those green spots where we could have burrowing owls. We do have, you raise a good point though. So how are we going to get CalRecycle on board? And is it enough just to say staff's going to continue to try? Maybe not. And I could say, separate from this plan, I could take it on myself because we have a lot of good relationships with environmental groups. We have a tremendous partnership with Acterra. We have tremendous partnerships with Save the Bay. We have good relationships with Audubon Society. And I think partnering with them would be very, very easy. Whether they're willing to come to CalRecycle or not would take a conversation or two. But I'm willing to make that happen. And I can commit to sitting down with them and saying, this is important for the park as a whole, not just Bixby, but the entirety of the Baylands. And I'd really appreciate it, almost like drafting a memo here, where I do the legwork and say, can you guys get behind this? Can you support this? I can't imagine an environmental agency that wouldn't support opportunities to enhance a threatened species like burrowing owls. So I think we could get some traction there. I can't say for certain that CalRecycle is going to be amenable to that, but I think that's our very best endeavor. And I'd be glad to spearlead that effort. And I think that's a viable technique.
Can I ask, do you think, is CalRecycle going to read this report?
Probably not. They've been dealing with landfills. That's all they deal with, right? Regulations regarding landfills. And so when a landfill reaches its capacity, it's not uncommon for it to turn to parkland. So this is not the first time they've heard this argument to do something different. We just need to sway them through a little bit of science. And I think we've got a very good argument to make that we've got some good evidence that proves that ground squirrels don't go deeper than 4 feet. Well, if that's the case and we're adding substantial soil to address that, then why would it be an issue?
Can you put that in the report, though, that those burrowing habits incite the evidence, just to have that documented?
It's possible, though I don't think we'll need to sit down with CalRecycle. It's a conversation sitting down with people. We're not submitting a formal amendment. It's a conversation. Ron Arp is not here today. My colleague Matt Krupp is, but Ron has sat down with CalRecycle and had the discussion and didn't get very far. He's made it twice. And as I said, we'll continue. But I think,
is Ron the right person? I think Mr. Krupp might be the right person to do that.
Well, they're both involved in the same areas and both have similar expertise. Ron has managed the landfills for, he wrote the permits, so he's the right person to.
The tension here is we need somebody who understands the wildlife to sit down with them. People who understand public works, I do not think they're the best spokesperson. I actually do not feel comfortable putting Ron Arp in charge of that. Because when I sat down with him, I was a part of our ad hoc committee, he didn't understand the environmental concerns that much. So I really want to put that out. If he's in charge of getting them to do this, I don't think he's the right person.
Well, he won't be alone. As I pointed out, we've got a good partnership with Public Works. We did this collaboratively together, and we brought in an expert. We brought in Tate Peterson, a well-respected expert in this field, to help with exactly what you're talking about. Our senior supervising ranger is Richard Bicknell. He's got a lot of experience at the Baylands, as do I, and I work with him very closely, especially around the Baylands, because it's kind of my baby. That's where I cut my teeth with Palo Alto, and I'll never leave it alone. I'll always be there working for it, fighting for it. But Rich is in good hands, but he's also got a very comprehensive document to help him manage it, which is exactly what we wanted, right?
That's why
takes
I'm asking
guesswork.
again. That's why I'm asking again for the. I think to educate Ron Arp, you need to have the owl. It needs to be documented in this document the burrowing behaviors of owls to educate people in public works who don't understand animal behavior. I really feel like that's a serious concern in our city because we have these two arms that don't understand each other. And Public Works has a really big role in this. And I won't be on this commission after this year. And I've worked really hard to try to have a voice for conservation among staff members who are on Public Works. They don't get it, as far as I can tell.
I have a big picture question here. I want to go back to focus of what we're trying to accomplish here. And this, we're here to hopefully approve the interim plan. It's not the final plan, it's the interim plan.
That's correct.
And currently they're not waiting for this interim plan to be passed, right? Their trucks are driving every day and dumping soil down there.
Well, as I mentioned earlier on, there was already a council-approved landfill closure plan, and that included having that system of pathways to get them to the leachate wells. We couldn't wait on that. They needed to do that immediately. The capping process also already approved, kind of outside the purview really of the Parks and Rec Commission because they have to do it. There's no way around it. So that part started, but the rest of the plan with the real park components, no, that won't start until we get your recommendation. We go to council and get approval for this.
Okay, so when we vote on this will then go to council. Council will approve it. And at that point, you're free to do the gathering spot, another park amenities, put up signs.
That's correct.
And those types of things will not happen without this plan.
That's correct.
Okay. And this is the interim plan.
That's correct.
Down the road, there will be a final plan.
My hunch is that in 2017, we could tie that into the Baylands Comprehensive Conservation Plan and have a master plan that kind of finalizes this, learns from where we've made wrong steps and hopefully improve it. And that's already in the 5-year CIP book.
And at that time, I assume we would know what our standing is with the Cal Recycle for the owls.
I'm hoping it's sooner than that. I would like to, concurrent with the rest of this construction, have an answer and push Cal Recycle into moving forward with the soil import on those 3 delineated areas for the owls.
So if council passes this and then a month later, Cal Recycle says, yes, you can do this with the owls.
We can still do it.
You'd be able to go forward. You would not have to go back to council to get approval.
Correct.
Okay. And how about if Cal Recycle compromises and says, well, you can do this, but you can't do that? You have that ability to work with Cal Recycle.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Maybe I can add something.
Please do.
Hi, Matt Krupp with Public Works Environmental Services, Zero Waste. There's a lot of ways down the road there. One of the interesting challenges that we have in terms of trying to address the burrowing owls is the regulatory restrictions that we're under that Darren did a great job in talking about. Ultimately, we do hope to put pressure on the state, and we believe that this is an issue that can be resolved actually by the state EPA, because fundamentally it's 2 different state EPA divisions that are in conflict with each other. It's California Fish and Wildlife, which wants to see this happen, and Cal Recycle, which doesn't want to see it happen. And they both have different reasons, obviously. But we in Palo Alto and in Public Works are committed to seeing this out, and it's a priority for us. We invested a lot of resources in this plan to making burrowing owl habitat happen, and we'd be very disappointed if it doesn't. We think it's an opportunity that's unprecedented in the Bay Area, and it's a rare commodity to be able to find burrowing owl habitat. There isn't much in the South Bay, so we are committed to making this happen. We're going to work with Darren and CSD to the best extent of our abilities to put pressure on the state to make this happen, because ultimately it's an intramural state fight to be able to resolve it. Cal Recycle, being the regulator of authority over the landfill, is the one that has all the cards in their hand. But we believe that we can make a difference, and that pressure can help. Community pressure and staff pressure can make a difference and make this happen. That's why we put it in here. We actually talked at length about taking it out, the whole burrowing owl plan, because we were afraid that it wasn't going to happen. But because we were confident that we can make it happen. We put it in there, we left it in there, it's a prominent part of the plan. And like I said before, I'm confident that we can make it happen for Palo Alto.
I would also note that on the habitat section of the Western Burrowing Owl plan, it does call out how heavily dependent upon the presence of burrowing animals, commonly the ground squirrel, in their habitat that they are reliant on for their nesting place. So it does capture it in the document that they are dependent on them. So it's not like it completely excludes squirrels. It just really calls out a separate area for them, given the confines of the regulations that we're under. Do you know what I mean when I say
I understand that, and
yeah.
that's why I think you need to put the science behind how owls burrow. You're not going far enough, like Emily Renzel said. You're almost there, but why not put the science, put in your arguments that you're going to make to this permitting agency. I want to see the strongest arguments within this document.
We don't need the document to make that argument. I can make that with a separate memo, and again, it's going to be a sit-down meeting with them, and I'll have the most robust argument I can muster.
But why? I don't understand why you wouldn't cite that burrowing behavior within this document. Does it harm your case?
No, it's just that we're here now. I don't see how it will affect this. I'd like to get this plan approved and move forward rather than coming back another time. So I just don't see it necessary or germane to make the case that I need to make to Cal Recycle.
I agree.
Other comments?
Hi.
Commissioner Ashland.
The first is about what's going on, why the squirrels have to be gassed here and don't have to be at shoreline. I understand this is up for a vote tonight. I don't want to delay that, but this is a very valid question to ask. Why is it happening, and is there a timeline that it needs to happen? Maybe shoreline is past that timeline, they no longer have to, but we don't have that information. That would be very worthwhile to know. Additionally, and I'm not sure if this is because this is an interim plan, but there's very few of these vegetative islands shown on the diagram, and a lot of intersections of the walkways where there aren't any proposed, and I'm wondering why that is. It seems like it would enhance the natural environment we're trying to create there, as well as increase wildlife habitat and improve the aesthetics.
So your first question is why is shoreline not abating their ground squirrels? They're not following their regulatory requirements. Is there a timeline? As I understand it, no. Right now, the requirements are you protect that cap, otherwise you run the risk of leachate and gas escaping. So that's why not shoreline is they're not following it. In Palo Alto, we're going to follow the law. And your last question, can you repeat that one more time?
Increasing the vegetative islands.
Yes. Originally, my hope was that we'd allow them to expand out. And in some areas that might be possible. So you would plant a couple and the concept is they'd spread. Some of the species on the island itself, unfortunately, are deep taprooted. So each of those habitat islands have extra soil added. So some species will be able to spread out, and that'll be great, and we'll encourage that. Some species that are on there have a taproot that will go down and damage the cap and can't be. So they'll have to be pulled. So originally my thought was we'll plant a few, they'll naturally spread out. Eventually I'll have this one big giant lush native garden out there. So that's part of the answer of why so few. The other one is it takes a lot. These all have to be hand manicured. So we're not going to come in with a mower and clear the vegetation weeds that grow into those. They're really labor intensive. And I think we're going to have our hands very full with 3 sets, to be honest, because you can't come in with a weed whip. It'll all have to be hand pulled. So we'll utilize volunteers as best we can, and staff will do it as well. And again, this is adaptive. So we're going to start with what you've got there. We come back in 2017 with a more elaborate plan. We'll have learned, are these successful? Can we manage them and sustain them? And how many can we manage and sustain? So my intent is we'll learn from these. I think we'll have our hands plenty full with 3 to start. And maybe we'll get really lucky and they're very successful and easy. And we'll do everything on the plan and then do many more when we come back for a master plan.
Thank you.
Any more?
I'm coming in late, so I apologize for that. And I gather there's been a hearty discussion already. So I'm just going to ask one brief question about the vegetative islands. I do hope that they're successful and we can do several more of them in the future. My question is whether the current plan, I think, includes a bench in all 3 of them. Is that a standard layout? You have all these layouts with the bench outlook nestled in the wall of the vegetative island, and I would hope that as we expand those, every one of them does not have a bench.
You know, that's definitely the plan, and we had mentioned a little earlier, I'm not sure if you caught this part, that we were gonna start with 2 near the benches, and then do, forgive me, it's hard to show you on the plan, maybe Matt can pull it up, if you look behind you, he'll identify on with the cursor, some of the areas away from those meeting areas, so the group seating areas, that will also be part of that first iteration of groups.
Oh, they will be?
Mhm.
Okay.
So we're gonna do 3 kind of clusters of them. So we'll start with 2 on the far right near those meeting areas. Essentially gives more people a chance to see it up close and experience and enjoy some of that native vegetation is our hope. And then 1 more remote, see what are the differences? Do they have, you know, different success rates for any reason that we can't predict? I don't know. So that's the kind of starting ones, then we'll expand out from there and certainly include many that are further away and eventually ones way off the trail as well. That is our hope.
Great. Thank you.
You're concerned with wildlife, or what was?
Yeah.
Commissioner Lawley.
Just a couple quick ones. In the absence of Palo Alto Baylands Golf Course, I do play the Shoreline Golf Course, which I did yesterday, and I was astonished. The science on how to raise these little owls is very clear because they're proliferating everywhere, this far away from squirrels and this far away from one of my golf balls. And they have them marked off, so they're relatively, I don't want to say tame, but they don't blast away and get all freaked out.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, they're
beautiful.
They're beautiful animals. And the other thing that's just kind of fun is that the squirrels and the owls are not always mutually complementary. Because one mama had a couple of babies and the squirrel got a little bit too close, smacked him down. It was very exciting, much better than the golf shots that I witnessed out there. I think this has made a lot of improvements from an already good document that we saw the first time, back about 8 months ago, I think it was. So, you know, hats off to the ad hoc for digging in on that. You know, process question, 8 months is probably a little bit too long. It would have been better to have it come back to the commission one more time before we have it as an action item and have to digest this. But I think that the changes have been really good, so salute the ad hoc for that.
And I could just make one point about the burrowing owls. So we, in the vast other parts of the Baylands Nature Reserve, we have owls, squirrels, brown squirrels, we don't abate them. And in some areas we've put in artificial mounds, and squirrels are allowed to be in there, they're all mixed in, put in the right kind of grasses, we did everything right, those squirrels came. And I say that only to point out that just having squirrels is no guarantee you're gonna have the owls. There are a lot of other factors, some of it's hard to predict. I've gone to several owl trainings with Lynn Trulio, the kind of foremost expert in our area, she's a professor at San Jose State, and she shows lots of slides of owls in the middle of Mission College, right below a little uplifted section of concrete. No squirrels there, and it's where hundreds of students walk every day, and that's where the owl decided to nest and raise babies successfully. Sometimes it's hard to predict. I totally agree that the best case scenario is have squirrels there, have mounds there, have the vegetation cut the right way, and that's what we're going to aim for. But I'm just letting you know that that's not, Mother Nature doesn't just say, okay, you checked off all the boxes, we'll move in. It just doesn't happen that way every time.
I have a couple of comments. I've been up there recently, and it looks a lot better than it did 6 months ago. It looks much less barren. The seeding, I mentioned this to you before, the seeding, some spots really looks good, and other places it looks a little sparse. Are we planning to reseed? Is that yes, no, maybe?
Yes, there'll be more hydroseeding to come.
And how do we do that? Do we do that by hand, or we have a truck that drives around? Or?
A truck comes and sprays out the hydroseed. It's incumbent on us to time it with rain, which is difficult, but if you just put down the seed, it will not survive. Your germination rate will be very, very low.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long did it take to receive the whole thing last time we did it?
They've done a few hydro seedings. Some unfortunately continued to settle below an acceptable standard, so they had to come in, add more soil, and reseed on top of that. Matt, do you have any more information on the seedings?
Yeah, I know that we had one that essentially failed completely on a good portion of, was it phase 2B? And then the last one did much, much better, where the plants are starting to take hold and mow. What we're concerned about now is getting, monocrop weeds. There's, I guess, a lot of mustard out there and some other things that we don't want to see. So it's a huge area and it's hard to keep a handle on. But, where... Yeah.
Do we have any funding to go through and take up the non-native species? Because there is mustard everywhere up there.
Maybe I can address that one. We've unfortunately got a tremendous problem with invasive species all over the Baylands, not just on Bixby Hills. And so we do a tremendous amount already with, 10,000 volunteer hours a year where they come in and pull invasives and plant natives, and it's worked wonders, but there's no way you can do it all at one shot. So sometimes you use alternative methods like sheet mulching, which we've talked about before, where you lay down cardboard and put mulch, and then you basically solarize the plants. The sun, absence of sun kills the weeds, you come back and you plant natives in there. But you can't do that everywhere. So sometimes you mow, sometimes you use all these different techniques. And very, very few or seldom ones you even use herbicide when absolutely necessary. You can't control it any other way. We're talking about a 120-acre area. And so hand pulling's out. Will never ever be possible to hand pull all of Bixby without there's just no way. There's not an army big enough to go in there and just pull the bad ones. So we'll use techniques like in some areas we're just going to let it be. So even though it's an invasive weed, we're gonna let it be. And in some areas there are worse things than that. It still provides some limited cover, and maybe Tay can speak to this a bit. But we've prescribed in our plan areas, all the slopes, which is not an insignificant amount of acreage, to let them grow in. And most likely there will be mustard and mallow and other less beneficial plants. And it's not the end of the world. We're going to do our best to maximize those native ones, because it's our belief that you give your best bet to habitat and to wildlife, that is, when it's a native vegetation that they've evolved with.
Over the winter I went up there, and there's a lot of wildflowers on the slopes, some of the slopes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had mustard there, you wouldn't be able to see the wildflowers.
Yeah.
That's a shame. Okay. Also, I like interpretive signage, and Baylands has some, but a lot of it is dated. It's been 20, 25 years since they were put in. You've identified some spots here. None of the spots are down below at ground level there. Do we plan to put any down there, or is that outside the scope of this?
It's outside the scope, but I've been working with the Junior Museum and Zoo has staff that help staff the Nature Center, and we're looking at a kind of holistic view of all our interpretive messaging throughout the preserve to kind of get a unified and holistic message out in different areas to make sure we're not sending the same message too much, and make sure we're kind of in concert with our neighbors in Shoreline to our south and Cooley Landing to our north, make sure we kind of all gel in together. So that's something that's kind of in the works, and it'll help inform and update those 20-year-old signs that you mentioned, and probably populate some signage on that lower portion of Bixby as well. But for this plan, it'll be focused on the top.
Okay. And I noticed you have park regulations up top here. I thought that it was the D over in the middle left. That's a park regulation sign. I would think you'd have that down below as people come up the hill, as opposed to to the left, further to right there. That's the park regulation sign. And I would think you'd move that down to one of the entrances as you come up. There's at some of the entrances you have D's.
We should get them all at the entrances, but I think on occasion we have one up top. Sometimes I think there's one here. Mm-hmm.
There.
And then there's another one down. I'm pretty sure we got them in every way up, which is kind of the standard.
If you look on the far right, that slope on the far right is not middle right. So farther to the right, that slope up does not have any signs on it as you come up that slope.
Over by the remnant marsh, Matt.
Yeah, right there. That does not have any. And then also, if you look up at the very top near the Burling Owl site, the green slope there does not have any signs entrance. Those two entrances don't have any signs as you come up.
And you know, I think part of that is we're catching them before. So you can't get to any spot out there. You can't get to the one on the far right that you mentioned without passing one on Matadero and East Bay Shore. So everywhere into the preserve, you're going to get hit with a regulatory agency sign so you can know the basic rules. The one on top is often helpful for the ranger who comes up to someone with their dog off leash and says, "I didn't know it. Well, there's one right there, and every single way up here you passed something that said you can't do that."
And I assume that you're not wedded to these sites.
No, I think
They're
there's
just
flexibility.
representative. So if you down the road don't like this, you can move it. You have the freedom to move it.
Yeah, I think
somewhere.
there's flexibility, like we do everywhere in our preserve. If something's not working, it becomes a problem, or it's no longer effective in that area, we relocate it to the appropriate thing. And sometimes change the style too. Sometimes the same message becomes invisible. They see the same sign over and over and over. If you don't change it, because like we see that with our non-feeding ones. If we don't mix it up, there'll be people standing right in front of it because no longer seem to see it. So, yes, sometimes we move it.
Okay. And one last question is about funding. I mean, I agree, we're not going to be able to nail it the first time. We're going to learn a lot as we plan things and change things. What pot of money is coming out now, and as opposed to 2 or 3 years from now, is when we do more work on Bixby? Does the same come out of the same pot? Or
Yes.
Is it, okay.
So it'll be capital budget.
Okay. So it's not like there's a special budget for that the landfill people have made for making it a park.
No.
It's coming out of general city budget.
That's right.
Okay. So we don't have any rush to.
There was a steady contribution from the landfill budget to do components, like the trails, for example, that were already done.
Okay.
That actually, if you were to have done that same trail system with Oyster Shell, you were like $800,000 in. It was ridiculously expensive. We got that quote from one of our better contractors. So I think we got a fantastic deal out of having our own public works group build it.
Not as easy to walk on as oyster shells.
Do you have any other questions?
I have some, just a couple.
Okay. Let's see what.
I have
Go
one
ahead.
question too.
Start with Jen
Yeah.
here. And then-
I just have one question that maybe you already covered again. There's a trail in the bottom left that's there from the bottom C and D going off to the right that connects to the other trail, and it's currently restricted.
Am I
Is
right
that going to
here?
be open? Yeah. Is that going to be? It's on here as
Yes.
an accessible trail. Is that going to then be open to the public?
And can I just, if you look at my cursor, are you talking about this part right here? Or are you talking about this?
I'm talking about the to the right.
Yeah, so it's closed off screen, right over here. There's a cable that has always been there.
Right.
The plan is to open this up so you could go this way. But for right now, where do we leave this map? That we're dead ending right here, right? For the for the interim. So yes, this will be open and you can get in here. What we're working on is connecting so you can come down through this way, which we think will happen soon.
And that's where the fox are on the left there?
There are fox in here. They travel through this area.
Okay.
And yes, there is a den site in and around this area off screen.
Okay, thank you.
And of course, they use Bixby Hills too. I mean, they're,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Cromer, just one note that this was a 20-minute item and we're at 50 minutes right now. So if we can keep it crisp, let's keep it crisp.
So you gave us this edited piece of paper that was based on the width of the gathering node that came out of discussion with our ad hoc subcommittee, which is great. I thought when I looked at the document, it was still cited as 50 feet. Has that been corrected in the
I
document?
couldn't change it in the plan, but that's why we added this amendment here.
And why can't you change it in the plan?
It's kind of a complicated answer. I'll do this one over there.
Can you just let me know why?
We can add some.
Yeah, we can add it in as an attachment to it. We were basically out of money, and we had to finalize the plan. I mean, that's the nuts and bolts of it. We didn't have any more funds available to our consultant to change the actual document. So we did that other drawing in-house.
And you can just append that to the plan?
Yeah. It is.
Okay.
That's why we attached it to this document. So we wanted to make sure that it was reflected as our intention of what would happen over there. We also wanted to show it as well because it did reduce some of the seating
in that area. So we had to lose 2 benches of that seating area.
I just think it's confusing when there's 2 statements in the plan, how you know which one to follow.
Well, the plan won't be the construction documents, so when we put out this to bid, all the nuances will be kind of scripted by both Matt and I with this contractor. So the guarantee is that when we write the contract to actually do the construction, it'll go in with a 35-foot diameter meeting area.
There's a statement in this plan that I think is a little confusing on one of the bullet points, and it's on page 22 of the plan, where you say what this plan does. The last set of bullet points on the final 1/3 of the page. You precede it by saying what the Bixby master plan says we should do, and then you say what this plan is doing. And on the 3rd bullet point down, it says the trail system in the park provides pathways to keep pedestrians and bicyclists from entering environmentally sensitive areas. And I think you really need to say there are barriers to entering environmentally sensitive areas. I think that this is saying the opposite of what we're trying to say here. It almost seems like you're saying that you're enhancing the ability to get into those sensitive areas, the way I read this.
So the idea is that they stay on the pathways, and the pathways guide them past the sensitive areas and not into them. And then there are barriers. I mean, we could certainly clarify that.
I think there needs to be some clarification in the language there.
Is there any signage encouraging people to stay on the trails?
We have that, is that on the general sign? It may not be, but we do periodically put in a kind of stay out sensitive habitat area. We have that throughout the rest of the preserve, and that's what we were going to use along the habitat areas for the owls, for example. I think the message we were trying to send with that comment was we're providing trails in the appropriate places to guide you and keep you where you should be, as opposed to no trails and you can kind of go where you want. And that's where people end up in places they shouldn't be. We've got that. Every once in a while someone will creep into the flood basin. You don't have trails in the flood basin. You're not supposed to be out there. But people end up in all sorts of crazy places, mainly because we're not providing a place that says this is where you need to go. This is where you're supposed to go.
Well, I think the way you said it was very clear, but I think it's unclear here. And I would just, if we can pay for another minute of consultant time, I don't know, I think there's a bullet point missing where you say that this concept provides habitat for wildlife. This is missing from here, and this is the issue I keep bringing up over and over again, is that we have these forces at play to make it public works oriented, taking care of a dump, a former dump, or are we really putting teeth into this document that this is for the preservation of wildlife? It's not even, there's one bullet point which says it provides 3 locations to create burrowing owl habitat, which we know are subject to this permitting, and there's no other bullet point about wildlife habitat, and it's recreationally oriented, but I'd like to have another bullet point that really speaks to all the work that's going in to provide habitat. That's what this plan is doing, which is consistent with our master plan, which is guiding this document. I don't know if we can afford to have that extra bullet point added, but if we can, I think it would really be important in this document.
Matt just highlighted, is it page 22, Matt?
Yeah, I'm on page 22.
Yeah, I think in the, going from the goals, the idea is that the Bixby Park Hills plan would be working correspondence with all of the goals that are established in, the Baylands Master Plan, which, in that, right in the top of page 22 is preserve and expand marshes, protect wildlife, and restore upland diversity of plants and animals, that we would be consistent with those key core goals.
The top bullet point, preserve and expand marshes, is incredibly important, but you're not doing any of that in this plan. That's why you're missing the statement about what you're actually doing is you're providing habitat. This plan does nothing for marshes. So it doesn't make the connection to what this plan actually is doing. It's not written from the perspective of wildlife.
So the reason that this section is in here is to lay out what the Baylands master plan goals are, just in the general, and then to identify what goals in the master plan, this interim fixed-use.
I understood that,
plan.
yes. And I think the goal of providing habitat is not mentioned.
That's not one in the list, you know.
That's what preserve and expand marshes is, it's providing habitat. It's just for marshland creatures. The spirit of the Baylands master plan is conservation with non-invasive recreational activities. I read it. I've read the Baylands master plan several times, and that is the spirit of the master plan. And I want to see that spirit of the master plan carried into this document. I think that's missing. It's missing from the understanding public works doesn't quite understand that, and that's why I want it in this document. I want to force it in there. I forced it all the way on the ad hoc subcommittee, and it's just a continuation of that effort to now force that bullet point into this document if we can pay for another couple minutes of consultant time. I don't know, I've never had a report come to us where we couldn't add like a necessary point in here as our commission. I've never been told we can't do that on my 7 years on this commission.
We could, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it's their work product.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can't wholesale modify their work. It's their work product for us. So we can modify it, but they have to be okay with those modifications. So if they're okay with it, we can modify it as we see fit.
Yeah, it's our plan.
Yeah, it's our plan. We can modify it, but it's also they sign off on it. It's their work product. So as long as the consultant is okay with the modification, then we can make that modification.
Did you have specific language that you
Provides habitat for wildlife as a bullet point.
Mm-hmm.
And also to fix the bullet point that's hard to read, and Darren already said some good language for that. Third bullet point down is too confusing.
So we can make those changes.
And while we're making those, can you reference the scientific studies that show how squirrels burrow into this document? This document's about burrowing owls, one of the main features of this document, and it's missing from here. And I suspect you know the references.
I suspect the references are in the reference section, so it would not be difficult for us to.
Thank you. If you could just cite that, that would be fabulous. I really appreciate that. And then some just small point. We have these 3 locations that are labeled 6. Those are locations for burrowing owls. And since we have our consultant here, one of these locations, the one that is, let's see, it's in this corner over here, this one. It has, the contour lines are very close together, and I'm just wondering if owls have ever burrowed in an area that's that steep. So when I first walked this area, that's why I was the one who said I thought there was a mistake on the contour lines, because when I first looked at this map, I didn't see the contour lines listed in the sphere for sections for 6, and to me, it's so, when I walk that, it's such a steep area. I was sort of baffled that owls could hope to settle in an area that steep. Is there precedence for that?
Well, that's the area where they have burrowed in the past. And also they like to burrow where they can come out on their burrows and see
Yes.
everything. And so that gives them an angle. It must be flat enough for them to be happy.
Because I didn't want to have a document go forth that was not, where we declare this is a place for them, yet it's scientifically, they've just never been known to be on a slope that steep. I didn't want to carve new scientific hopes.
They also
Here.
have grounds built for them with artificial burrows.
Which to help supplement the steepness of the grade. Okay, good. As long as there's a sensitivity, I just wanted to point that out in this document from having walked it. And then lastly, on your page A6, which is this page, it's the mowing page. I just want to make sure this is clear. you have the yellow part and you say side slopes mowed less frequently. So is this whole section, I'm a little bit confused to what mowing is being done in this yellow quadrant right here. On this, it's labeled as page A6. It just says in the key it says that the side slopes are mowed less frequently. What does that mean exactly? For that covers a lot of space.
It's Appendix A.
Yeah, but I don't have it in my document.
Well, except it's not the entire zone.
It's not that entire zone,
No,
yeah.
it's this, you're talking about steep slopes in there. Any more detail on that?
Oh, yeah, we're just talking about, it's not, I think that's not the best graphic to look at. I think it's better to look at this main one. And the steep slopes are in darker green.
Okay, can you fix this? It's just too confusing. I don't think someone could follow the directions based on this figure. I don't know how
That
someone.
would be the figure that they will have in hand when they're following directions.
Well, it's in this report, and I don't think it should be in this report unless someone can look at it and make sense out of it. I just don't know what this is saying, because it's implying that that's the only place that there's slopes, yet we know other mowing's going on there. It's very confusing.
We could, probably it would be best if we just remove the graphic. It was, it's something that doesn't reflect the most up-to-date mowing regime, so we can, thank you for that, Kat. We can pull that out.
Okay, and then just as far as I wanted to let Emily Renzel know that we are going to have a CIP for signs in the Baylands, and we might want to revisit signs as we get through that CIP. The idea that John Aiken had was to sort of take a more comprehensive look at how we do our signage, and I think that's when we can address the problem of having signs that are just eyesores without conveying the information. I also hope you would.
We're at 65 minutes.
Okay,
so
lastly, I hope you would not put a sign that says "Don't dump feral cat's hair," because I just think it gives the wrong impression, and I think it gives people more ideas than anything. So I'd really not like that in there. Okay, that was the end.
So if we make a vote now, the vote is on the modified document. Is that how it works?
Can we specify that in the motion?
Okay. So do we have a motion to modify the document and approve the interim plan?
I'll make that motion. I
Okay.
motion that we approve this plan with the specified modifications that our consultant and staff have agreed to.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Can I just clarify those modifications? I want to make sure I get everything right. And Matt, hey, maybe you could help me if I miss this or Rob. So we're adding bullet points. I want to make sure I get the
One
page
bullet
right.
point.
That's provides habitat for wildlife.
Yes.
We're fixing the language on the third bullet
Mhm.
point. This is page 22, yeah?
Correct.
Okay. And we're adding a reference under the burrowing owl plan about ground squirrels, their association, strengthen that component of the association with burrowing owls.
With a citation to the scientific literature.
Okay. And especially details on typically 4 feet deep max.
In horizontal versus down.
Okay. Was the comment about owls on that steep slope addressed to your satisfaction so that we don't need additional comments in that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And we're fixing or removing A6, the
Yes.
ambiguous yellow. Is that everything?
Yep.
Okay, very good.
Okay. So we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have matrix comments review for the master plan.
Thank you.
Darren, take out the cat.
You can't, we already voted.
Sorry,
You
I
can't
know,
do
I know,
that.
I know.
Stop it.
Sorry.
I'm actually surprised we're doing that. I don't intend to vote
I
anymore.
know, yeah,
Sometimes in a big game like that, this stuff sneaks in.
it's under the sign.
It's all
You have to read in there, it's suggested sign in the sign section.
Are these on all the time?
That means
Anybody know?
short
Yeah?
comments.
Is it on all the time?
Sometimes.
To watch that.
Peter Jensen.
Rob stepped out to make a short phone call, but he's going to be back in here. So, good evening, Commissioners. Peter Jensen, Landscape Architect at the City of Palo Alto. Our continuous process of the Park Master Plan. It's going to be a two-phase discussion tonight. One is going to focus on the comments received back from the homework item that you were given last time to review some of the matrix things. There were a few commissioners that had some specific comments on that. We addressed those things were in your package if you saw those things. We're also going to pass out a few of some updated binder items, which we can go through and put them in here in a few seconds. And then hopefully at the end we're going to get and start the initial transition to the next phase of the project, which is the setting up the principles that will guide the process of making recommendations. So without further ado, I'm going to give it over to Ryan and Ellie, the consultants from MIT, and we'll go through this process.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us back. I know a few things have run over. I'm going to try to keep my part real brief and make sure that we can get a chance to certainly make sure that you guys are comfortable with the comments and revisions that we've made, and just introduce perhaps the plan framework discussion, and we can continue that conversation as you guys get a chance to sit and ponder it, which I know is important to get a little more time. So as Peter mentioned, we're kind of in a place right now where we've been spending a lot of time and effort right here with our wonderful binders and our great big matrices, and we have an updated matrix for you tonight, as well as a few other pieces. And what we're starting to see out of the comments and out of the responses that we made, I think we're feeling like you all are doing pretty well with working with this. This has helped to share what we're working from in terms of our raw material, as well as how we're putting all of those pieces together. And so it feels like the comments are showing a pretty high level of comfort with that. I want to say that our intention is not to say, okay, now we're done with that and we're moving on. What I want to say, what we want to do with this in terms of process is really to continue to work, continue to use and reference this matrix, and especially to use and reference this extensive library of source material. And so you'll see as we go through some of the stuff tonight as well, that we'll continue to reference things specifically by section number, and we may well find that there are some pieces of information that we still need to tease out, we still need to dig up a little bit of additional information. But at the same time, we also need to be figuring out how to transition from kind of and I think we came up with this at the last meeting too, how do we transition from that last column of the statements of need and the findings of this overall process, and into actions that we can take as a part of this plan to move forward. And so that's really, we're right in the crux of that. I was joking that on the diagram that we were using at the last meeting, which I've got on the presentation, I didn't realize the room we were in. I would have skipped the presentation part of this, but we're kind of right on the arrow between that data and needs summary and the actions, criteria, and prioritizing part of this process. So with that, I just want to run through really quick with you what the materials are and what our intention is for you guys, because the comment and response memo that you guys got is responding to both what we heard at the meeting last month, as well as the comments that were submitted online over the couple of weeks following that meeting. And we tried to be as descriptive as possible of, yes, we made a change based on this thinking, this is what we changed it to. What we want to give you tonight is the updated actual documents, so you have them in your binder that reflect those changes. We didn't have them printed and prepared quite ready for your packet, so we wanted to make sure that you got them and had them in place for your binder. And there's basically 4 pieces that are in play here. And the comment response memo we just talked about, it did come in your packet, and it details those the reasoning behind what we might have changed. The updated data needs matrix will be your new version of the great big sheet here, which responds to some specific comments about inventory. It responds to the specific comment, the request to provide a little bit more of our thinking in column K, which is that projected demand. So each one of our line items has a little bit more explanation on that front now. And it resolves a few other questions that were clarifications from the comments in response. We also talked last meeting about the inventory and it being missing a page that explained the which sites we had identified as serving the different activities and some of the access to nature and those kind of things. The new inventory, which you'll be receiving here, I'm going to have him pass all this out here, has a 3rd page that explains all of that. It was intended to be a part of that original inventory, but we've also updated the inventory to react to the comment about the sports fields at the high schools, specifically to make sure that they are not part of the sum totals of what's available to the community. I didn't want to take them out of the inventory entirely, so we kind of gave them an asterisk and took them out of the totals, took them off of the matrix. The final piece, and that inventory is a replacement for what's in your binder, just clarifying there. We'll replace just pull out the other stuff and drop this in. The same with the program analysis. We made some clarifications and revisions to that, and we wanted to give you kind of a whole chunk to replace that section so that we've got, we know that we have the current version. I know there was some question last time as well about let's make sure we have current versions of everything. So we're trying to clean up some of that as well. So those are the materials that have been revised. The revisions that we spoke of are pretty much detailed in that comment response memo. I wanted to make sure that, I know that many of you took advantage of the opportunity to do the kind of homework assignment. I wanted to make sure there weren't any other lingering comments that we wanted to get out on the table at this point, but I also want to do a little bit of explaining following that of how we can kind of use this working document and kind of carry it forward into building some direction and some recommendations for this plan. And so I'll let Peter start passing some things around. I don't know if anybody had any other notes that they wanted to relay about the specific revisions or points on the matrix. But I'd give that opportunity while we're handing things out here real quick.
And I didn't know if each of your binders had a little pocket in the front for it, so I gave you that little clip if you wanted to clip it into the front inside of your binder plan, but it's not necessary if you do that way.
And unless you have your own notes that you really want to keep, there isn't any particular reason to keep the old version of the matrix either. There's no magic. It was pretty much an additive process in terms of responding to your comments.
Ryan, what section is the inventory?
Inventory is section 8.
It has 2 11 by 17.
And as I said, with section 8, you can just tear out what's in there and drop this in.
That's section 8 of your binder. Let's take out the old and put that in as needed.
Yeah, the big Excel table.
Yeah.
No, not that. That's
Behind the map.
Oh, it's behind the map. Sorry. Here, I told you you could tear out the whole section. I'm lying. Sorry, it's the Excel sheets that are behind the map. Don't take the map. The map will be useful. Yes, 2 sheets. There's one front and back and one additional sheet, and it replaces
Replacing one sheet.
It's replacing one sheet, correct. We promise to recycle anything we leave on the table.
Are these the ones we're looking at right now?
Yes.
Thank you.
I guess I one thing to put on the table. Should I do it now?
Please.
I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the high school playing fields, because one issue I've had forever on this commission is just how we use the schools' resources for our city. And sometimes it seems like we do a really good job using them. You know, we have the middle school athletic program, and it seems like, from what I've understood, it's a good partnership. You know, I'd have to ask staff, you know, whether they think so, but just superficially, from what I've heard, that seems like a really good partnership. And it does provide resources for our residents. But I feel like we don't have that same thing going on with the high schools. And I'm in kind of a unique position. I live in Palo Alto, but my kids are actually in the Los Altos School District. There's a neighborhood, the Monroe Park neighborhood, 150, now 178 families, because we've built 24 condos there. We have 178-ish families going over to Los Altos School District. And so I see how my kids in that, I see how they use their high schools. They have 2 high schools. Just like Palo Alto does, Los Altos also has 2 high schools. And my kids have always used those resources as students, and I see the community using them a lot in Los Altos. I've never drilled down by talking to people in the city structure how they do it, but what I feel like, what I've heard anecdotally in the city is that there are these fiefdoms within the high schools, and they're controlled by the coaches, and it's a moneymaker for the school because they can rent the facilities at very high prices to all these hungry clubs, many of them which do not have residents within our city, and they're hungry for really high quality fields. And Pally, I know, has a beautiful new high quality field. I don't know about guns resources as much, but I just feel like it's an elephant in the room when it comes to trying to because, and then yet we have this movement within our city to possibly build more playing fields way out in the Baylands, which are really hard for kids to get to. And so yet at one point we had at least one council member interested in doing that. I'm not, and I saw the power of that because I sat on the golf course ad hoc, and that person had a lot of sway. I don't know if that person still wants fields out there or not, but I'm saying, why are we not trying to do something about these beautiful resources that are actually located geographically closer to where the residents are? And now, based on a comment from at least one commissioner, I don't know how many commissioners wanted those taken off of our tables. Now, I don't know if taking them off is getting us farther away, but like, I just wanted to understand what, because I don't agree with any movement that hides it more, hides that resource and buries it.
I agree with that, especially the part about not removing them, and we didn't end up removing them. They are not calculated in the total. There is there's a note essentially at the bottom of the second sheet there that says the high school field's not available for community use, or they're starred essentially, and then they don't add into the total available essentially for community use. And so
you just want to add the word yes.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, that might be nice.
But I think that, yeah. So carrying your thought forward, I think that is a recommendation that that could certainly be in this plan, is to continue to make.
I'd like to say that we're getting off topic on this because the high school fields are not City of Palo Alto. They're school district property.
Right.
We have no jurisdiction over them at this point, and I don't see that in the foreseeable future. I think we need to move on.
So the other piece that Peter's passed out, just so that we have this correct, is the program analysis, and this replaces section 5 in your binder, and it's both pieces of the program analysis. As we talked about before, the first part was supplemented later by the extensive data analysis of the recommendations, which we talked about at the last meeting. Both of those are now pretty much as a whole complete, and they are now section 5 of your binder, and the references all remain the same. We just are cleaning up a few clarification points.
Another swap?
So there's no major substantive change?
The only thing that is an addition to the part 2 that is worth drawing your attention to is at the very end, we did add on, at your request, some of the data about the visitation of the preserves. And we had that conversation as well at the last meeting. It's the final section of part 2, so it's really the last page or two that highlights a few key facts that we discovered from that data analysis.
Great,
And I
thank you.
know you're putting a new date under now.
Yes.
Which is the way you're doing version numbers.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we want to give you. We'll give you the anything that we do. We'll make sure that we have the revised date listed so that you can tell that it's the current one.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Thank you again for that. We were trying to clean that up. That was one of the reasons why we gave you both sections again instead of so that we didn't have any clarification necessary there.
I just want to clarify this, the packet that Peter handed us, where does that go?
Section
Number
5.
Section 5.
Even though it
Replaces
looks
it?
pretty different, like the,
This doesn't go in section 5.
oh, I must have something.
This
screwed up.
goes in section 7 or.
Okay, I'll talk to Peter afterwards to get it correct.
Peter can help you sort out
Okay,
any of
I
those.
must have a mistake.
There's also, if the first section, I believe, has the source list, which has the document titles as well, and so you can double check on that too. So with that, like I said, I don't want to say we're done talking about this. We don't have any. We can't bring this back up at some point. The matrix is something we're going to continue to reference. The binder is something we're going to continue to reference. If you find questions that you want to get answered, let us know. But I would like to use a little bit of your precious time here tonight to just talk through the plan framework, which is what we're working on, and we're just introducing this to you. This is not something that is final. We don't feel like we have this 100% done yet, 100% right. We want to introduce it to you to illustrate to you how we're envisioning moving from these needs, from all of this data analysis, into some direction for this planning effort. And Peter's handing out to you now.
This is
Yeah.
for the binder.
And this is a concept, much like we produced before we did the matrix process. We wanted to show you kind of where we were going and how, so that we can and so we wanted you to have this in hand, give a chance to introduce it and talk about it a little bit, and then we will continue to work with this. So it's something that is in process as we go forward. But what it's really about is this transition between the data and actions, and the key piece that is necessary to really shape the development of actions and development, what ultimately are the recommendations of this planning effort, is to make sure that we are setting some direction where this park system is going. And we aren't just going to pull that out of the air, we aren't pulling that out of our pocket. We're really drawing that again from what we heard in this community, what we've heard from you, what we've heard from your staff, but really putting a high priority on what we've heard from the community. And so there are 4 pages to this document, and the first page is a little bit of introduction where we're at with this. The second page, I'll highlight the second section here. There's a set of bullets that really do emphasize what we're talking about here. This is a working version, but what we're hearing, the themes that we're hearing, and I don't think these will be foreign to you, are that Palo Alto's Parks, Trails, Open Space, and Recreation System is, or should be in the future, inclusive, accessible, balanced, healthy, flexible, sustainable, and playful. And I'm going to walk through each one of those quickly just to give you a sense of how we're organizing this. But the third page then talks a little bit about where those came from, where we heard those themes particularly in some of the public involvement out and outreach results. So if you want to go back and look at, well, where did we hear this? What did we see? These are some specific sources. But as we said, we see these as themes that have come up in a lot of different places and are supported by what we've been hearing from you all as well. The final page on this, on page 4, is about applying these ideas. And one of the ways that we've found to find this to be most useful is as you're considering any given action, any given recommendation, what are the questions that you would ask yourself to see if it fits? And we've offered a couple of these questions for each of these principles to give a sense of, as we apply this, where would it, how would we judge this kind of meeting the criteria, or meeting this principle, or coming close to this principle, or approaching this principle. And we don't necessarily consider this to be an exhaustive list yet, but we're working on it. We wanted to give a chance for you all to provide some feedback, and I want to just walk through these really quickly to give you a sense of what we're talking about when we use the word inclusive in this context, and the wording may shift. You guys may have some thoughts on that as we go forward, but I want to just quickly walk through each of those principles. So inclusive, really thinking about ages and abilities, languages, cultures, all levels of income, really involving the whole spectrum of this community in the recreation opportunities that we're offering. So there's a couple of questions that we pose just to start thinking about that, and some sources that tie back into that. All the material that's on the slide here is just reorganized out of this memo, so there's nothing new. It's just giving me something to follow along with. And accessible is really about making it easy for people of all abilities to get to use those activities year-round, get there by walking, biking, rolling, however they need to. And this one has a few more questions, a few more sources. And balanced is another way of thinking about the mix, the how are we going to do this. And we really heard a lot of desire for, it's not going to be all about one thing. It's not going to be all about trails, or it's not going to be all about nature, or it's not going to be all about competitive sports. We want to seek those different points of balance, and we've suggested a few of those points of balance that we've been hearing between natural spaces and manicured landscapes, historic elements and cutting edge, high tech and high design features, self-directed and programmed activities, and finding that what we heard in the community was that it should not be overly emphasizing any one side of those kinds of balances. Healthy, I think, mostly speaks for itself, but I do want to emphasize that we are talking about both physical and mental health and well-being here. There's a lot of great evidence around that we have a lot of potential to benefit both physical and mental health with our system. Flexible is talking about how can we pack in those layers of activities, multiple uses across time, including adaptable spaces that will create some space not only for what we're doing now, but what will emerge with future use. Sustainable, while an oftenly or a well-used or if not overused term these days, there is a standing definition with the city around the 3 E's of sustainability that capture the economy, the environment, and social equity. And we felt like there's some important aspects of that we really want to work into this overall. And finally, playful. And this is the one that I personally feel pretty strongly about. I think that there's a lot of potential, and this goes to the how do we get people to get excited about the park system. And I think that there's an inspiration factor. And I think that that's play for kids, that's play for adults. Imagination, creativity, joy, innovation is very tied into these kinds of things. And so we wanted to make sure that element is continually worked into this as well. And so I really want to get, I know that this is a lot, this is new, this is a lot, but I'm curious about your first responses to these principles. I know in talking with staff about these, there's some that feels like maybe 7's too many, maybe there's some that could be collapsed, maybe there's some things that are missing or aren't explained well enough at this point on a first blush that they're like, I get that makes sense to me. And I'd like to get your guys' kind of first blush about the principles themselves. And then I have a couple of examples if we have a little bit of time that I can walk through of how we would see starting to apply these, like just to kind of walk through some of that. So maybe some thoughts?
I'd put playful at the top.
Put playful at the top?
I mean, that's the whole reason to go to a park, is to have fun and relax. And the other one, accessible, for people of all abilities to use year-round and to get to by walking, biking, or rolling. Rolling is just such an odd word. I would just say vehicular, because there are people who have limited mobility and can't walk or bike to a park. It's just seems a little too out there.
Okay.
Spell it out more.
All right, appreciate that.
I like
Commissioner Cronin.
no. Oh, sorry. Sustainable, I do think it's overused, and I'm seeing it start to creep in a lot. And I'd like to be cautious about how we proceed with that bullet point. I'm not sure how yet, but I need to give it some thought. I do like the other ones, they all inclusive, balanced, the rest of them.
Resonate.
Yeah, they're good.
I also concur with Commissioner Markovich that unless we define what sustainable means, it needs some definition in there more than what you've given it, a clear statement. Balanced, I don't like that bullet point particularly. I think that all the bullet points add up to balance, and so I don't think you need that. I just think it's confusing. And instead, I think the bullet point that's missing here is the word, we need nature, and I would suggest a bullet point that says respectful and connected to nature, respectful of and connected to nature. And I would say that your bullet point should bring balance and you don't need a specific one, because it's trying to say, I think it's trying to say too much.
Okay, appreciate it.
I actually like the balanced bullet. I think it's really important because under all of these principles, there's a balance that has to be struck.
You could go too far on any one of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And particularly the flexible one, I wanted to add something there about balance because I don't want the impetus to be to just cram everything you can into a park.
Mm-hmm.
And the questions that are raised here could well lead to that.
Okay. That's helpful.
On the accessible, I felt like public transportation ought to be mentioned there. And I wasn't sure about when it says for all people of all abilities to use year-round. I don't like to go to the park in the rain. I do like to go inside to nice places in the rain to facilities. So it seems like that is trying to say a little bit more than is really feasible. Maybe it's implying there's a variety of amenities such that there are, indoor facilities as well as outdoor facilities.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with that.
And then on for the healthy bullet, I was thinking of adding, social or community to that in some way. So it's physical and mental health and well-being, but it's also social opportunities and community building that I felt like was missing from the list somewhere.
That kind of community health piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
We're bringing people together and enabling that. Yeah.
I like that.
I won't, a lot of good comments already, so I won't add a lot to that. The flexible one, I feel like there should be somewhere here where we're actually trying to tell people the limits. And so Commissioner Headley's comment, that was a good one. We can't just jam it all in because everybody needs it. But we also have to be tolerant of multiple uses for the limited amount of stuff we have. So somehow that sort of teaching moment could be here for residents. I don't know how we escape the sustainability because it's a big deal in Palo Alto, and I think that it is a guiding principle, and since it is, it has to be there. I think wordsmithing it could be fun. Well, stop there. But the right tone. Oh, I would agree. If you could get it a little smaller, the tendency is to get it even bigger than this. But if you get it a little smaller, it's just no.
And we'll keep working on dialing that in. I think that is an important one, especially as you start applying them, because the more factors you start trying to work with, the less clear it becomes sometimes. And I would agree.
When I first looked at the list, my first instinct was, oh, what a bunch of politically correct buzzwords. But when I walked through each one seems reasonable, and I wouldn't necessarily yank any of them. But the one thing that came to my mind, which isn't on this list, is the growing population. We have no more space to buy parks, and we have a lot more people coming in, and that's a huge challenge. And I don't know how you work that in here, if you even do, but that, in my mind, is the biggest challenge I look forward.
I think there's something to that, and where we fit that in, I think that is absolutely one of the big challenges I know you've been
That
bringing.
goes in the sustainable one if it's spelled out and worked a little.
That's true.
That's an interesting point, because if you elaborate on that, then you could talk that sustainability as population grows, you've got a capacity component of that. That's I think that that's another one like balance too that hits probably on a number of different points. because capacity is going to be an issue for a lot of them.
Well, and flexibility also.
Yeah.
Ryan, do you want to go over an example? real
Yeah,
quick?
let me run through one really quickly, and like I said, we'd love to get any additional thoughts on this, but just thinking about what might an action start looking like if it was guided by these principles as we originally wrote them, and as we were thinking about them. And one of the examples that we came up with, we've talked a little bit about nature play as an additive feature in the system. As an action, you can think about these as recommendations as well, but action items that we would be thinking about in the plan: add universally accessible nature play feature to existing sites. There's few key words in this, and what the guidance of these principles allows us to do as we're developing these actions is to really try to tailor them a little bit, rather than just saying, oh, wouldn't it be great to have nature play? Let's talk about how we would do that in order to react to the guidance that we've heard from the community. And so that's why universally accessible nature play, not just nature play, not just universally accessible play. Adding it to existing sites in this case is a kind of a specific choice as well. The needs we're addressing here are about those additional play experiences. These are pulled right off that last column on the matrix. We're just trying to find ways to meet multiple needs as well as multiple principles as we go through this. And so we've got several needs specifically called out here, including integration of accessibility of all ages and abilities across the system, nature play experiences as a way to experience nature, but also as a different type of play experience. And then thinking about that same action against these principles. And I think that you can make a pretty convincing case as that action's written that it could address all of those principles pretty directly. And I'm not going to rattle through them, but I think that if there's anybody that has a particular question about one, I do have some thinking about each one of those. And then just to give you the other example as well, on the programmatic side, thinking about okay, that works for a physical addition to the system, but what about something that is purely about people, purely about the interaction with services that we provide? One of the things that we heard a lot about, and one of the things that came out in the comments from you all, was that the importance of that developing coaching capacity for middle school athletics, for sports programs as a whole. And so one way to approach that might be to develop a coach training program that feeds into that middle school athletics and other sports. It's based on building capacity within those volunteers. It addresses a variety of those needs, as we said, that were called out. This one, however, doesn't necessarily, in our minds, hit all of those principles. And ultimately, we think that's okay. The intention is to build as much of those principles into everything as you can, but you're not going to hit 7 out of 7 every time, or if it ends up being 5 out of 5 or whatever. And so that's a little bit about how we would apply this. What we're saying here is this is how we, as your planning team, take these needs and shape them into an action. And so we're using these principles as the guidance. So this is your opportunity in helping us shape these principles to shape what those recommendations might look like as they start coming out onto the ground. And I guess with that, I'm curious if you guys see immediate questions or thoughts about well, what would that do in terms of the overall plan or specificity of guidance that you guys want? Happy to talk about other topics, but these two just kind of came to us as good examples to start with. And I know that's a lot as well, but it's something that we wanted to...
It doesn't have to meet them all.
It doesn't have to meet them all.
I totally agree with that. I mean, you can't violate them violently.
That's an important point, is that they should be...
But it doesn't have to check the box with bells ringing.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you a question? What do you mean as our consultants when you say nature play? What does that mean for you?
So nature play, for me, is primarily about creating creative play environments that integrate natural surfaces, natural environments, and emulate basically it's so much easier to explain in experience. It's like it emulates the playing in a vacant lot or a forest experience in a designed environment, essentially. And so it's that's my shortish answer.
Okay.
There are a lot of things that it can mean, though.
Okay, so I would just want to say that really scares me because I don't want that to substitute for what I see people saying is wanting a connection to nature. And so you can't replicate nature. You can preserve it and allow people to come into nature. And that's what is at huge risk in the city. So maybe we can do both, but I don't want one to replace the other because it's very superficial to decide you're going to bring nature into an urban landscape. It's just, it doesn't cut it for me. I think it's one of those things that looks good, and it's great to do it because if you have a choice of a bunch of plastic or more natural materials, great. I think kids benefit by having contact with natural materials. I'd say do it, but if you think it's substituting for that, I would look very closely at the end of this, how much you're allowing, like bringing insects and birds in, to those ideas of the butterfly garden and the bee garden, and where kids have an experience of real nature, not fake nature that you buy through the internet, by having this lovely natural materials. That's natural materials, it's not nature. And again, I would always support using natural materials, but I don't think it substitutes, and as long as you can do both, that's great.
Okay, thank you. I think that's an important point.
I have a question. There's, I recently heard, and I can't remember which park it was, but that some of the new benches that were installed were actually plastic designed to look like wood instead of wood. Are you familiar?
Well, yeah.
I think they're recycled.
Yeah,
material.
Much more durable.
So we are going plastic in our park benches now.
I don't, not all our park benches, but I know that we're experimenting with some of that material.
You experiment that when it's 90 degrees and go sit down on it with shorts. You're not going to be happy.
That's the sustainability creep.
Yes, exactly.
Talked about. It's
That's
in.
exactly right.
No,
She's right.
And it's invisible yet pervasive.
Well, I think tonight what we wanted to do is we wanted to basically put this out to the commission so you guys can look it over, have some time with it, have some thought with it. Because next time we're going to come back and have a more extensive conversation about what this is. The other thing too is that this isn't the end of how you get to the recommendations and how to prioritize them. So you can get a list of recommendations from this process basically, and then there's going to be then another process on that talks about the prioritization of those recommendations, and it'll talk about timeline and how much things cost and how many things that we have and how big it is and if we have the room for it. So there's a refined detail that then will go past this. This then basically allows us to start to form that list basically of those items and then to get into that process.
We're filtering as we go here, and we're working from the big list, the needs, and what's possible out there. There was kind of everything that was possible. There was the things that we identified from data and from the input that were the needs. We're starting to work down to the actions that could address as many of those needs as we can work in. And then, as Peter said, there's going to be a process in this that really will be those practical points around how do we figure out which we do first, how do we apply limited resources.
Well, I wanted to comment on accessibility because I think we're talking about some big ideas based on your presentation. As far as accessibility goes, I think we have to be very research-based, and I just want to make the point that our city just invested in this beautiful new park, the Magical Bridge Playground, and just being there and talking to people who are using it and excited about it. I know that that community would like features of that park in all of our parks. Mm-hmm. We did one, that is exclusively accessible, but we want to, I don't know, eventually maybe all parks can be exclusively accessible, but that's a pretty big price tag. And so I just want to know, what is our city doing to research, keep the research going, like of the elements that were put in to that park, which are the most popular, which, also throw in natural materials if you want to fold in, more than one feature maybe, or just are the ones that have some natural materials really popular within that park that can, bring that kind of what you're calling nature play. I consider kind of more natural materials in my own head unless you're gonna build a stream or something, but it won't have any fish in it probably, To me, real nature has little critters in it, bugs and fish and that kind of stuff. So I'm just wondering, I'd really like the accessible community to kind of have a voice, an ongoing voice to let us know what works, what holds up, because it seems like a lot of those things are very expensive and what deals with a lot of wear and tear. How is that going to be documented and is this an appropriate question, do you find? Is this?
Well, I think that as far as the Magical Bridge goes, yes, that it is. It's definitely something that it is a one-of-a-kind thing that should be always looked at and improved, hopefully, in the future, and we should learn from it. And I think we can use some of those things that we review and understand over the next year as this process goes on to put into our master plan. But there definitely are two separate things, and I think that I don't know the process or how it's documented now, or we're going to do that. But definitely the friends are out there every day, and they make comments to me about what they think is working or what's good or what needs work on. Which we can start to document somehow and then add to the base of the master plan.
Because at the end of this, when we're getting to prioritization, accessibility I see is essential, and it's one of the tenets, rightfully so. It can go in a lot of different directions, and so I just want to make sure when we get to the end of the day, we're not lost in terms of like where do you want to where do you want to go with that? Do you feel like you're gathering enough information over time to? I don't feel like I know enough right now.
There's a lot of, so there's two pieces that I'll add to that. I don't think that we're going to, in this plan, be recommending at the level of what features are going to be in a playground. That will come in the subsequent process of designing that playground on that site. But in terms of the guidance, we will be able to draw on some of the things that we've heard, because Magical Bridge will be, forefront knowledge, but we also have a group within our firm that does nothing but accessibility, largely focused on parks, and is in kind of constant communication with the ability and disability community in California specifically around what is working, what it can be worked into existing sites, and those kinds of pieces of guidance are something that we can bring to this plan.
And just to broaden that, to connect it to paths, I consider accessibility to also relate to elderly getting down a path, and so we have had comments in Bixby Park on surfaces. Some surfaces are easier for our elderly to walk on than other surfaces, so I would like that dialogue to happen with the proper people so they can give that kind of feedback.
Great.
Okay.
I think this is a good start, and it's helpful to look at it this way with these principles and these kinds of questions. It would be helpful for me to have a few more examples of where this would lead you that we can contemplate to see if that's where, because it may lead us one place, it may lead you another place, and if they're far apart, we're going to want to come back together. So some more examples would be helpful to react to, and if we could get them in advance of the meeting and not at the meeting.
Now that we have some general discussion about this, I think we can definitely do that. So I think that was kind of one of the things I wanted to end with, was what would be most useful. And it sounds like a few more examples, some revisions, some tweaking of language based on the comments here, and then we can kind of build from that.
The tricky part is when you have so many options or so many criteria, that how do you weight them? And you can't, if you weight them equally, are one more important than the other? And if you gave a group of people and said, here's the rules, and now here are the park decisions, even with the same criteria, they would make different decisions because they would weight them differently.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to the weighting.
Well, it also depends on the park and the neighborhood and who lives near there.
And there is a level of specificity that's going to be, that will be a trick, but there's this kind of guidance can help keep it in a discussion that's going in a direction that is, in line with the rest of the system, and I think that that's important.
Well, humans are, like squirrels. They're unpredictable. So if you have a park that they're going up for renewal, this is a good guiding document, but it might not always work. So that needs to be acknowledged.
Great. Thank you all. I know this is a lot of material to drop on you again, but like we said, we wanted to kind of bring back some feedback and take a step forward, and hopefully that you guys will get a chance to dig into both of those and let us know if there's any other thoughts. Please contact Peter about that specifically.
So can we just talk about the next steps and the next few months and what we can expect? So there's some new material that you were given last month, some new material again today, there's some big things there, so obviously reviewing all of that, appreciating, making sure that you're comfortable with it, reviewing this new framework, and then we come back in June, we look at this again.
We were working with your staff on this. I think that we will continue this conversation at your next meeting, and that into the summer, what we're going to be building are the kind of the list of actions, the groups that whether they'll probably start in larger categories of actions and then start refining down from there, and ultimately building towards, because of the summer break, we don't want to push too much of community engagement into the holiday here, but we're going to build towards a check-in with the community about what seems most important to them. Probably right first thing at the beginning of the school year is what we're aiming for right now, and so we're going to spend the summer kind of building towards that with you all and with us as staff, and then at that point we will have most of the content for the overall plan in place, and it will be getting down to more of review and getting into the specifics of timeline and how we will ultimately push things forward. So we're figuring that the last kind of public push would be at the end of the summer, possibly with some type of outreach effort to make sure that we get as much involvement as we can. And we've been talking a little bit about possibly asking some questions in an online form that leads up to a public meeting forum that tries to maximize what we can get out of that last push for what seems most important to them, using that as another major input for you guys in thinking about what comes first and how to move that forward. So that's really the thrust right now. We'll be able to get you a little bit more detailed schedule based on some conversations we were having with staff today, probably by your next meeting. Get a little bit more fleshed out on what that looks like.
We'll try to set a time for a council study session, and you ask for that. Be right after the summer, which will be good as well. And we have the stakeholder meetings and community meetings, and the plan for a draft plan to be ready. What was the timeline again? I just want to show it. See if we're looking at the end of the year, beginning, right in that, depending on how it falls, because the holidays and everything else, it's kind of, it's going to be end of the year, beginning of the year, to get that draft out, and then things get a little bit more dependent on things like council and commission schedules, and so timeline becomes a little bit harder for us to dictate, and so we'll have to turn it over to the whims of the scheduling people. But we'll try to push that through process appropriately. So.
Do you remember so I don't know exactly when I can ask. I'm just a citizen of Palo Alto, but I'm interested in a couple of issues regarding parks. Is this the right time and place to ask it?
No, but you can leave your name and one of us will get back to you.
Does she want to speak to this agenda item for 3 minutes?
Is it related to the Parks Master Plan?
Well, it's about off-leash dog parks within the existing parks, so I don't know if it would be part of the master plan.
We can't talk about that because
it's not agendized.
But you can come back next month, the fourth Tuesday of every month we have a meeting, and you can talk about anything you want right at the very beginning of the meeting, right at 7 o'clock.
I see. Okay.
And you can say, you have 3 minutes to say whatever you want.
And we're almost finished, so then.
And you can also write. You can also write us a letter by looking at our website.
So we don't have a joint meeting tomorrow, right? We cancel it.
Right.
Scrap it.
Right. Everyone say goodbye to Ryan because he has to go.
Bye.
Bye, Ryan.
Bye, Ryan.
Can we get special treatment?
Yeah.
I think that ends this part. For me, I think the biggest part is this framework, is to really spend some time thinking about that, because this is a filter that will be used as we do the public outreach and think about priorities, and we can't do everything. So how do we start to prioritize recommendations? And this is the filter. This is the first draft.
But I think it was Pat's point, or no, it was Keith's point, is a good one, that it's easy to come up with priorities that represent all these issues, it's hard to prioritize among the items.
Yeah, that was my
And so
reaction.
this doesn't address how you're going to weight the various pieces. I
So,
absolutely
think
agree with
about
that
over
comment.
this next month, because this is going to be a main topic for next month, having to deal with that.
I mean, they're all admirable goals, right? It's kind of like
Yeah.
arguing against motherhood and apple pie.
It is.
Right. But in practice, we're going to have to weight some higher than the other.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to weight things equally.
We're going to have two interests for the same park.
Yeah.
And how do we make a decision?
Yeah.
Okay. I have some comments on the matrix. Should I email that, or do we talk about that now, or?
It's up to you.
Yeah, it's pretty quick. It's pretty quick in the sense that in the middle section, we talk about recreation facilities. We determine whether we have enough capacity. And a lot of on column F that is, of the middle section, when I look down there, a lot of them come out of source 5. And source 5 is city programs. And knowing how many people sign up for tennis classes doesn't tell you how much tennis courts are being used. And so you really can't use the under subscription or over subscription of tennis courses to justify the number of tennis courts that we have. And we see that up and down.
Which column?
So that's column F. So the middle section, wherever you see column, I mean, it's not bad data. It does give you some insight, but especially something like tennis. People who've been playing tennis for 40 years are not taking tennis classes, but they're playing every Saturday morning.
Mm-hmm.
So that by itself is not enough data to justify tennis courts.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my only comment.
That's a good comment.
Excellent.
Moving on
Is
to
that,
comments?
you done with everything else then?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ad hocs. Okay, do we have any ad hoc, anyone else? I contacted some people and I don't think any of them had anything that they wanted to say about their ad hocs. We have stuff in work, but nothing that needs sharing, so.
When is dogs gonna come back?
Dog parks were scheduled, dog parks were penciled in for next month to have an update.
Okay.
Are we having a public meeting between then and now?
I don't think so. We're waiting on Abby for something, and I see she's not here tonight, so I don't know what her status is on that.
Okay. If you have something in the next month, we'll talk about it, otherwise 2 months from now.
Okay.
I mentioned we were almost done, so what I meant was that I could introduce you
Yes.
to the
Yeah.
commissioners.
Oh, well.
Okay. Then, no more ad hoc announcements. I lost my agenda here, but next should be announcements.
You want this one?
Oh, thank you. Okay. Comments and announcements. Rob, do you have anything?
I don't have anything.
Oh. Okay.
Wow.
Agenda for next month.
Well, Parks Master Plan will come back.
Parks Master.
That's the main topic.
I'd sent you an email, Rob, about
Yeah.
cost of services. That was scheduled to go to City Council.
Yeah, I think
Did.
cost of services has gone to City Council.
It has.
was on consent and was approved. Within the staff report, it talks about community services and we have a separate a fee-based cost recovery policy, and that once the larger citywide policy was approved, and we would go back and review that policy specific to our department. So that
So is that coming
will
back
begin
to us
now.
then, or is that going to
Right.
staff?
We go to staff first, then we'll go to the commission.
I'm sorry, is it going to city council before it comes to us?
It's already gone.
It's already gone.
The
Oh.
citywide cost of services.
It was already presented at city council.
It was on consent. It went through the finance committee, was approved there unanimously, and then it went to.
So I have a question for you, Rob, about that. How do you see the intersection between the cost of services study and the master plan? And know in terms of the cost recovery for community services, last time we talked about it here, community services department had sort of a tiered approach for subsidizing various types of programming that's based on principles of what the city's goals ought to be in serving certain populations. Shouldn't that same framework somehow integrate with the master plan?
Yeah, I think it will intersect, and there's a part of the master plan that'll talk about revenues and cost recovery. It's in the scope, they haven't gotten to that's one of the last elements of the plan. The citywide cost recovery policy really mirrors in a lot of ways the CSD community services cost recovery policy, which is tiered in the sense the more personal individual benefit, the higher expectation of that you would pay to recover the cost of that compared to sort of a more public benefit, you know.
So I'm just concerned that we don't want to end up with some internal inconsistencies between that major project and this major project. So how do we check that? That's my question.
Yeah, we'll make sure that that happens. I can resend out the policy to you all so that you can take a look at it, make sure that it's makes sense to you and refreshes your memory.
Yes.
I'll also send out the policy that was approved probably 7 or 8 years ago related to just our department, so you can take a look at that. I think we'll start in the fall with reviewing that policy, which will be right when the master plan is starting to come together.
Is that the policy that Lom presented to us
Yeah.
before?
That's right.
Okay, yeah, it'd be great if you could resend that.
Yeah.
My major complaint with that cost of services was we were constraining ourselves, I think, artificially low on our costs because we were not reflecting the fact that we're using city facilities. And then if we were a private company and we wanted to come in and use city facilities, we'd have to pay rent.
That's right.
And we were just looking at how much labor we have for our costs. We really should be looking at the cost of renting that parkland or renting that room, and that would reflect a more accurate cost. That doesn't necessarily mean we have to charge more, but we have the freedom by the law to charge more.
Because there's an opportunity cost for using it ourselves
Exactly.
instead of renting.
We could be renting out to someone else. So,
And so some of those costs are built in, the cost of maintenance of the building, there's an overhead factor built into the cost of services policy. I'll send it to you.
yeah, we won't be that, now, that was my general complaint. I thought we were, because we're constrained, we can't make money off it.
Right.
I thought we were constraining our costs artificially low by not representing the city assets that we're using.
So is this something you want to bring back to discuss next month? Policy and services, or?
Or do you want to let
I
the
don't
staff
think so.
chew on it for a month?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think it's necessary.
And
So let me send that out to you all, and then, you know, if there's an interest,
Yeah.
certainly.
I think I would like to see in the next 2-3 months, if possible, to come back. Even if we don't do anything, but just let us chew on it and maybe give staff some recommendations.
Okay.
And you thought about maybe having John Eakin come back
Yeah,
next month, maybe?
John Eakin was scheduled to be, we penciled him in for next month.
Oh, okay.
For what?
This signage CIP?
For the Baylands.
Oh, okay.
And-
This
and-
was
Not the zoo at all.
No, nothing to do with the zoo. Because he's also in charge of open space at Baylands.
right.
He wears 2 hats.
He's responsible for programming at the interpretive center in the Baylands.
Perhaps.
He's helping with the CIP at that center.
Okay.
And
Do you want to have any staff, because we're coming upon summer, often we'll get some kind of presentation on how summer camps are going, you know, that
Yeah.
kind of thing is always really nice to have around now.
Okay, I'll see if someone can come and present on that.
Or like a report on how the new facility is, you know, the new.
Yeah, the New Mitchell Center.
Yeah. Integrating, how we're integrating teens, you know, something catch-all that has something to do with teens as well.
Okay.
It's always nice to hear about them.
I found our last meeting with the zoo to be kind of unsatisfying. And what's this path forward for that?
This is the new Junior Museum and Zoo potential rebuild. So, working through a process with the Friends of the Junior Museum and Zoo on a potential construction agreement and governance agreement, and we're meeting regularly, but we're not anywhere near an agreement yet on that. At the same time, there's an environmental assessment happening of the design of the building and Rinconada Park master plan generally. That's still several months away before complete.
And we had some comments, could they use off-site storage to shrink the building, or could they have a basement to squeeze it into a smaller footprint. Are any of those being considered, or
We've shared that information with the designer, architect, the Friends board, and John. So
Do you think we need an ad hoc committee on that, just to have some representation from our commission on some of those conversations? If someone, maybe we could discuss it on our agenda, whether to put together an ad hoc?
we could do that. I had recommended last time. I don't think though the commission was interested. Was a meeting with the full commission on site at the Virginia Museum and Zoo, so we could look at the facility, think about it, and walk out to the park and look at where the boundaries would be. Would that be helpful? To test some of the thinking and questions you might have. But I think the commission, if I recall, didn't think that was the best idea. Rather have the team come back with some more thinking.
We wanted to see some alternatives.
Alternatives, right.
That's one option, because there's always more than one option for every
I'll tell you, it works
Yeah.
a lot. We asked for that in Bixby, and we only got it through having an ad hoc committee. That's the only way because it's just hard to get those things. It really takes some more intimate meeting time.
Yeah.
If that's,
Well, they can't misread the
I
direction.
think we were pretty clear.
The comments they gave. If they
Thank
go
you.
back to
Yeah.
the commission, the only
Of course they think.
No, and I think
It
that's
won't pass this commission,
and then
would be
you
my
end up with
prediction.
nothing.
Yeah, unless they can define it a little better. I
It's a
do,
risk
they,
for
they
that.
do feel like, and I think to some extent this is accurate in my assessment, is that it's somewhat right-sizing the activity that happens there now. It is so busy there. There's so many people that use that site, and of course it's not just Palo Alto residents. It's a regional draw of a program, and it's just it's jam-packed. So that they certainly don't think this is sort of the Taj Mahal, the big option for them. This is, the right-sizing the program for.
I mean, but I think
happens there.
both of those comments I said before about whether they have a basement to shrink
Yeah.
the footprints, or whether they have off-site storage so they can have 100% of the space utilized for programs. I think that those would be things they could certainly consider.
Yeah, I'll bring it up to them again. We certainly can. They need to come back to the commission. They need to come back with some thinking around alternatives. Now, the alternatives might be, look, we could make it smaller, but it compromises what we're trying to do here in these ways, and that's why we don't want to do that. On the other hand, they could say, yeah, we were able to tweak a little bit and not encroach onto the park lane as much.
I'm just worried that if we don't get ourselves involved, they will go down the path and say, "Oh, sorry, Park Commission, it's too late. We've done all this. We've done all this work on the new design, and we can't go back and revisit anything."
Well, it requires a park improvement ordinance to get this passed, and the commission will have a say at some point. Preferably, though, really we want to bring something to the council.
It's better early than late.
Yeah, that the commission feels really good about. Actually, it's better to have a process like this where it comes back a few more times. It does get changed a little bit, tweaked, so we get a better product. Usually we get a better product at the end. And that's why you go through this. I'll talk to them again and see what makes sense in terms of the timing of them to come back and push them on this, this idea of scale, really, a little bit.
Another possible agenda item is field use policy. It's been 2 years now since we did that, and with this master, we have this great matrix in here, but it really doesn't represent all of the sports field users. It represents the city programs for the most part. And so I think it would be helpful to have Adam come and give his sense of how the brokering is going, how much clamoring is there for more or different, what's working, what's not working, and I think that would be helpful in building into the prioritization process that we're
He just
getting
finished
started on
last
here.
week, fall broker.
So good time to come.
With all of the users, you know how those meetings are.
Yeah.
And, so it'd be a good time.
That's a great, I second that. I think it's an excellent example, just to get ready for prioritization.
Yeah,
kinds of
it's
stuff.
a big one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Move to adjourn.
Actually, I would like to move to adjourn this meeting tonight in honor of Ray Bicchetti.
Oh, great idea.
We lost him a few weeks ago, and he was a tremendous volunteer with the city and put in, I can't even tell you how many hours or years that this man has helped through all of us through, school board and Project Safety Net and Human Relations Commission, just I can't even mention how many things he's done. So I would like to adjourn this meeting in honor of him.
I second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We are done.
Since Peter,
Well,
I need to know where to put this properly. Do you mind
It
if I
goes,
look?
it does go in number 5.
And did you pull out